Hello everybody, welcome into another stream. Hope you're doing well. So on last night's stream, we watched two videos. The first was Why Evolution is a Bad Thing, Crucible and Omen's Symbolism by Levovit Lore, which was the first part of a two-part series where he is now going to talk about why Dung Eater's ending is the best, not what we think. And then the second video we watched was Kaguri, Themes of From Software by Acer Aesthetics #1. So to follow up that, which turns out to be a multi-part series, we will watch the second video in that one with Enlightenment, Themes of From Software 2, second tonight. And then depending on how much time we have after that, we might watch Radahn's Missing Lore Solved by the Discerning Tarnished, because I imagine I won't have as many things to say about this video as opposed to the one about Kagari specifically. So anyway, nice to have all of you guys in again. So we have No Hokai, Levovit, Mash, Without Horns, Stella, Iman, Astanex. How's it going, guys? Glad you're all here early. So Mash, I actually don't recognize your name. Were you gifted a sub, or did you change your name and or your PFP? Because I try to pay pretty close attention to that. But anyway, No Hokai says Buongiorno, and I just wanted to say Buongiorno back to that specifically for no real reason. So, okay, folks. All right. Let's go ahead and dive on into why Dung Eater's ending is the best, not what we think, by Levovit Lore.
He's a madman. Has it out for everyone. Curses them. Goes round in his rank armor and all. You see him though. Stay, well, away. I was in the same jail as him once, so I know firsthand. He's a god-forsaken monster. Not just some petty dog like me.
The Dung Eater. Easily one of the most hated.
I turned off the subtitles or the closed captions. Anyway, Zionist, thanks for extending the channel membership, my man. You've been a long-time member. Appreciate that, as always. And then Adlai Black, welcome back to the stream, as well as Zionist. So, right, let me back up the video slightly and then complain about it.
The Dung Eater.
Here we go.
Easily one of the most hated beings in the land between. Not just in game, but in real life discussions. In this video, I will explain what is the metaphorical significance behind Dung Eater's ending. And it's probably not what you think. It's not just cursing all people because of hatred. And it's not even as simple as popular opinion. If everyone is omen, then no one is omen. It's something more deeper and even more optimistic. The video will have 6 different sections. The first section.
And his last video did come out before the DLC, and I'm imagining this is probably working on the same framework. Yes, okay. Hey, Global Sequence, welcome back in. So I did turn down the volume level. Let me know if it sounds a little bit better for you now. Everyone got weaker.
Quick recap why evolution is a bad thing. The second section will be about how Golden Order tried to solve this problem, the first solution. In the third section, we will talk about the second possible solution to the evolution problem, the medical solution.
I gotta admit, that is the smartest looking omen I've ever seen.
In the fourth section, I will try to convince you that Dung Eater's actions were driven by good intentions, that he
You know, the blushing just makes me more inclined to believe it.
Was a good person, after all. In the fifth section, we will talk about what Dung Eater's ending means, using only in-game logic.
Ooh, I did not entirely catch that. We will talk about what the Dung Eater's ending means, okay.
We will talk about what Dung Eater's ending means, using only in-game logic. The main topic. The sixth section. Metaphorical significance of Dung Eater's ending. How does it present to us the third solution to our unsolved evolution problem? This video serves as the second installment of a two-part series on the Dung Eater lore. The first video focused entirely on
Oh no, Dr. Fake Love is in the chat. That's not a good sign. That's a terrible omen. He tells me to fight Balteus. I won't. Oh yeah? Well, you showed me. Alright, so I guess that is taking our AC6 dono streak to the $100 threshold. So I guess I probably should have pre-planned this and had like streamers, non-content creators, like go off on the screen, confetti, all that, so we could all celebrate that and whatnot. So yeah, Dr. Fake Love, thank you so much for the 13 and welcome into the stream. So yeah, it looks like I'm a little bit boned and I'll need to play AC6 soon. I don't know if I'll do like a full playthrough, but I will at least give it a good old college try and a shot. So maybe, what's today? Wednesday. Maybe around Saturday I can make that work or something like that. I mean, I'll figure it out eventually. But yeah, thank you guys so much for all the donos. Now, looks like Dr. Fake Love is taking a little bit of the wind out of the sails of Maudley. So, okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Now, let me back up the video slightly because I lost my train of thought with that. No, this is not Futurama. It is not Friday.
This video serves as the second installment of a two-part series on the Dung Eater lore. The first video focused entirely on evolution, and I recommend watching it first for full context. However, I will provide a brief recap here to ensure this video can also stand alone effectively. Evolution has two aspects. Trial aspect, which is natural selection. In Elden Ring, the Crucible serves as a metaphor for this concept. The second is the chaos aspect, the random mutations that contribute to diversity in life. In Elden Ring, omen symbolizes this random mutation, but more specifically, the bad ones, the mutation which lead to disadvantages, the bad genes, which can be transferred by blood. For simplicity, you can think of it as an illnesses. And why is evolution problematic? Because natural selection no longer operates as it once did.
So about that notion with bad blood, I feel like this could be working on two different levels and I'm not so sure how compatible they are because the omens literally do have accursed blood, but I don't necessarily know if that means like the blood is accursed because of bad genes specifically. So that's just kind of a funny thing to think about there.
Today, virtually anyone can survive and reproduce, regardless of genetic disadvantages. This means people with hereditary illnesses, poor eyesight or weak immune system can live normal lives and have children who pass these genes to subsequent generations.
And just as I was kind of making this criticism with the last video, even in the past that was possible, but certainly it was less likely, or maybe not like less likely, but less widespread due to the fact that, yes, indeed, with the advancements of civilization, we are able to synthetically expand human lifespans beyond the law of the jungle and like tooth and nail and whatnot. And then True Connoisseur, welcome back into the stream. How's it going? And Mr. Yada, welcome back in.
As our medical capability advance, this...
That one wasn't me. That's YouTube sucking.
These optimal genes will be passed throughout humanity. It is only natural that the Order rejects the chaotic nature of evolution due to their incompatible nature. Of course, this has been a simplified explanation. If you are still skeptical or interested in more detailed information, I encourage you to watch the first part of this series.
I think that's fair to an extent, although I do think that this video would have been strengthened if Levo had said the reason why evolution is incompatible with the Order is because America is keeping things as they are because there is no more death and arguably no more birth. So obviously, like a little bit of that does tie into one's individual interpretation of like what the Golden Order is and when it was instituted into the timeline. So I do think that was a very interesting point that you brought up in the previous video about how evolution can represent change, whereas the Golden Order doesn't necessarily want change anymore. And if you had just brought that up slightly here to entice people to go and like watch the previous video, I think that would have been better for your own point overall.
Natural selection is not working anymore due to the Order influence. Today, even these with weaker genetic traits can survive and reproduce, passing their genes on the future generation. But the Golden Order, as always, made things even worse, way worse. By the law of nature, the weak perish and the strong survive. But this no longer holds. Even if someone is born extremely ill, he will survive. Literally everyone is immortal now. Everyone survives. Consequently, every gene, regardless of its detrimental quality, is passed on to the next generation.
So now I've just got freaking Aretha Franklin stuck in my head. Too bad all those would cost royalties to play for this video.
This is a real problem. People after 5,000 years will be even weaker. So, what's the solution? It's quite straightforward. If natural selection is no longer effective, why not implement artificial selection? If nature can't
Alright, so apparently I was wrong. It is not Aretha Franklin. It's Gloria Gaynor. I forgot who sang that song. Anyway, looking silly here.
Prevent individuals with detrimental traits from reproducing, perhaps it's something we need to manage ourselves. We don't like omen? Just kill them. Just put them underground for rot for eternity. Brilliant, right? Omen killers didn't kill omens because they enjoyed it or wanted it. Omen killer Rollo. Once a famous performer, Rollo, embodied a physics to rid himself of emotion, thus enabling him to enact his nightmarish labor, hunting the omen. As he was once a famous performer, he had everything, money and fame. The decision of rid of emotion
Did he leave it all in one piece?
implies that he feels regret. He didn't want to kill omens, but he has to do it. It was a mission. He truly believed it was the right thing to do. Maybe that was even a direct order from the Golden Order. A mission.
So, to be fair, I don't know if I would go so far to characterize Rollo as not necessarily wanting to kill the omen. It could have just been that he didn't want to feel bad for doing it, but still felt as though he should do it, which is kind of what you're saying here as well. But I think you just went one step further than I would.
To purify our species. But the plan ultimately failed. Due to the mess caused by shattering, omens were able to escape the shunning grounds of Leyndell. I have a lot more to say about other implications of why the Golden Order hunts omen, but I already did it in another video. You can watch it if it seems interesting. To truly understand what I mean by artificial selection, I can give an example from other media. Marshall. New anime based on Shonen Jump manga. In that world, every single person is a magic user. To reach this state, in the distant past, all non-magic users were eradicated. Whenever a non-magic user is born, the government executes them to maintain the status quo. Now, only magic users remain. Thus, a world in which everybody can use magic begins. That's what artificial selection is, and what results it can produce. This is the most peaceful solution. The solution which is used in the real world. If omens are like people with diseases, then why don't cure them? From performer Tricia Ashes. Tricia was once known as healer who dedicated her efforts to trading with Begotten, omen, and all this seen as impure. So Tricia attempted to cure the poor omens.
You know, that's a really good question, and this kind of makes me wonder if the nature of curses in Elden Ring is even more similar to that in Dark Souls, because allegedly curses, well, at least humans couldn't cure or remove curses, the best that they could do was redirect them. And so obviously the Homens had the horns excised, but they still had their accursed blood to a lesser degree, I guess. Or I don't exactly know what's going on with like the excised omens, but they certainly use less cursed based attacks than the ones that have the most horns. So the question really does become, why weren't they cured further, or why did they not take more efforts to do so? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Maybe that was like part of Mikola's plan, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. And then Alexander, welcome back in. That premise of MASH will last for like 2 episodes before they completely forget about it? Okay. It's a bad manga overall. Oh, so you're just, recommending inadvertently a bad manga to your viewers? Cool. Alexander says you're glad you didn't keep up with it then? All right. So then I'll take that off my list. I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting premise. It reminds me a little bit of like Blue's story in Saga Frontier, but okay.
And not only famous Tricia, but other performers followed his examples. From performers traveling Garb, an associate of a healer, he is said to be in search of new aromatics and flower garden, in hopes of treating misbegotten, omens, and all this seen as impure. But they all ultimately failed, as the medical knowledge in the lands between is quite limited, which is understandable. Based on the Blessed Dew talisman, we can see that people were healed simply by being near the artery. There was no real need for doctors during the artery's time. Furthermore, after the artery era ended and the age of the Golden Order began, the motivation for medical research weakened even more.
And you might even be able to make further claims about the lack of a need for traditional medicine or anything like that, just because even death isn't necessarily the end for organisms, as evidenced by Yura / Shabiri, Hayata / Arena, Rykard / the Snake, and so on and so forth.
With people now immortal, what need is there for cure? In the real world, things are simpler. For every blind person, there are glasses that they can put on. For every curse, there is a blessing. So
I do feel like that is a little bit insensitive, because not all blind people will eventually be able to see, and not all deaf people will be able to like be compatible with like cochlear implants and things like that. Prosthetic limbs don't necessarily fully replace non-artificial limbs. So anyway, moving on.
Even if the genes that makes you blind will succeed, it really doesn't matter. It's not even a problem anymore. That's the beauty of medicine and civilization. An interesting observation. When we defeat Morgoth, he lacks horns, a tail, and scales. None of the typical crucible traits. I don't know yet what it signifies, but maybe
it could be that if something is dead, will it still be continued to be possessed by ghosts or continue to be cursed? That might tie into the whole horn thing, but I'm pretty much on the same page here, but I don't fully understand what's going on here.
Maybe it is curable after all. With every mention of the Dung Eater, game describes him in negative light, as a villain. His actions are portrayed as cursed, loathsome, dangerous, and utterly evil.
He's a god-forsaken monster. He's a killer. Kills people and curses the souls. Does all sort of shit to the corpses to keep them cursed forever. I ain't seen nothing more disgusting in all my years.
He's back. The Dung Eater, again. I can even hear the repulsive twisted malice in itself.
Even the trailer narrator.
The loathsome Dung Eater.
The reviled curse that defined our age.
The item descriptions also follow the trends. The Dung Eater cultivates the seedbed curse on corpses, one of the most loathsome things found in the lands between.
I think it's... Oh, you might be talking about Maybe not.
His name in Japanese, Kusokui, is literally a slur. The ghost in Castle Mona describes him as disgraceful.
So let me double check it. My recollection as far as, what was it called? Was it the curse mark? Oh, Seedbed Curse. If I remember correctly, in the Japanese, it might be written as a little bit hearsay, or like it's considered. No, it's just one of the most loathsome things. Okay, so that's a pretty accurate translation. Hold on. Oh, it's the second line that has like the little bit of hearsay where it's like perhaps they'll be left to be cursed forever, I guess. So anyway, that's not too important.
Even the key, just an ordinary key, is described as filthy key received from the Dung Eater. The game really wants to create an impression that the Dung Eater has only one bad side.
Well, to be fair, I think it'd be even more surprising if a key that we got from a sewer was like in pristine condition, especially from a dude who eats poop allegedly. And of course, there might be more to that story with the Dung Eater kind of being a reference to the story of how Kappa were said to eat the Shiri Kodama from people, which is why like people's rectums get distended or something like that if they drown. And so people in ancient Japan thought that there must have been a yokai that was like consuming something out of them and like sucking it out of them, because it's, you know, not the natural state of a human. And that idea might be passed on to the mythos behind Dung Eater, in that he could be personified as essentially ripping out people's souls and consuming them, or something along those lines. Like how this from Sekiro? Kind of, but not exactly. Oh, apparently Adlai has not heard that story before. I thought people were a little bit more familiar with that now. Okay.
To curse and kill everyone. But who defines what a curse is? Just because someone is labeled negatively doesn't mean they are inherently evil. The definition of curse and sins are established by the gods. And in Elden Ring, the gods are, let's say, not the most reliable source. Misbegotten were once considered divine, but as civilization advanced, now they became no more than cursed beings. It is a recurring theme in Souls game. Recall Dark Souls 1, where humans were led to believe that holy living was a bad thing, and the curse of undead was to be feared, because gods just fear the true form of humans.
Old winds in the dark, clinging to his age of fire, and in dire fear of humans, so that you may link the fire, cast away the dark, and undo the curse of the undead.
So did you try to adjust the like sound effect in your post-editing process for Koth, at least, because of the bonfire noise? That's like, I totally respect that. But if you ever do need footage for dialogue from like the Dark Souls games, or if you just need the cleaned up dialogue, there's a decent chance that I might already have it, because I've like covered a bunch of stuff like this. Although I would probably have to like rifle through one of my spare hard drives, because I'm sure that's where it is right now. But yeah, I'll be glad to help you or anybody else in chat out with stuff like that in the future. So that's just kind of something I noticed. But with that being said, for future reference, I think one thing that's good to do, and also kind of a pain in the butt to do for like footage purposes, is to play through the game with like sound effects off while you talk to NPCs, so that way you can get a clean cut of what they're saying. Okay.
On the other side, what evidence suggests that Dung Eater might actually be a good guy? The first clue is presented at the very beginning of the game. Dung Eater is mentioned alongside tarnished heroes such as Gideon and Horalu. I believe that the grace extended to the tarnished was specifically granted by Marika. There is substantial evidence supporting this theory, but it's not the focus of our current discussion. I am planning to explore the metaphorical meaning of grace in an upcoming video, so please.
So, I don't think you went quite that far, but the impression that I'm getting is that you might be implying that because people were extended grace, they can't be all entirely evil, which I can understand that to a degree, but I'm not entirely sure that the stewardship of the Elden Ring and the Elden Lord cares about one's intrinsic goodness or badness, and they might just accept whoever's the most powerful for the purposes of their continuation, especially when the tarnished player character can go on to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame or things like that. We also have, some pretty reprehensible tarnished who were given grace, like Okina, who just goes around hunting people and cutting them. He's become one with his sword and is essentially a Shura. So that's not exactly the most nice thing to do. So anyway, I digress. Defile 7 corpses and nobody calls you corpse defiler. Bring about an age of omen, nobody calls you omen man. But you eat dung one time. Exactly.
Please stay subscribed. Please. So then why did Marika extend grace to Dung Eater? He clearly had a bad reputation back then, as you can see from this image. Maybe because Marika knew that person is not always defined by his reputation alone.
And then this right here, I think, should also bring into question that if Marika was willing to accept the Dung Eater, like, on a more personal level, like a more intimate level, like she may have, like, known the Dung Eater and he wasn't as bad as his reputation implied, then why did she continue to essentially jail the omen? Well, I guess maybe she didn't. Maybe Morgott and whatnot could have been let out before she shattered the ring. There's probably a good argument to be made for that. So I don't know. There's just kind of a weird paradigm shift to consider, which doesn't mean that it's not true or anything like that. It's just
maybe
kind of a pain for
because
me.
He wasn't that bad after all. The second evidence comes from Dung Eater's omen armor, worn by the Dung Eater. The heavy, sun-shaped medallion represents both the guidance he once saw and the ring to which it will one day lead. That confirms that Dung Eater's final goal is to establish his own order.
I can hear, in the Malison, another fearsome order.
And judging by the sun-shaped medallion on his armor, his order is in line with grace. He wearing a sun, which represents grace, which Marika granted to him. So he must be a devoted follower of the current order. He truly believes that what he is doing is what guidance of grace wants him to do. And it's specified that the sun is heavy. It means this burden is really heavy for Dung Eater. He didn't enjoy.
I feel like that's more of a figurative reading on things, but I would say because it's made out of metal, maybe the implication is that it's heavy. And if you want to draw more from that, that's perfectly fine.
It, and didn't really want to do it. He has to do it. Also Melina, she is caring about the future of the lands between. If we attempt to engage with the Three Fingers and unleash the flame of frenzy, she will kindly ask us to stop.
A pity. You are no longer fit. Should you rise as the Lord of Chaos, I will kill you. As sure as night follows day.
Yeah, just imagining the look on Melina's face as you pick up a pile of gold-tinged excrement and start going, om nom 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 nom.
And if the Dung Eater's ending is as bad as people think, why did Melina not say a single word about it? Because she is perfectly fine with that new order. She knows what it implies. The third piece of evidence supporting Dung Eater's good intention can be found in his dialogues, where he frequently refers to a curse as a blessing.
Hey little church lore, welcome back into the stream. How you doing?
You warded off my blessing, despite the cursed that must receive the blessing. Give me your blessing, defile, and bless in my stead.
Curse blessings to war!
And this is
And it is important to note how polite he is, because whenever he sneezes, he says, "Bless you!" And, the ghosts come charging at us.
isn't merely his delusion. The narrator says at the end,
Our seed will look back upon us and recall the blessing of despair.
the next generation will see the outcome of the Dung Eater's ending as a blessing, so there are definitely some positives in him. And the fourth evidence. It is really circumstantial, but think about it. At the end of the Dung Eater's quest, he asks us to kill him and defile his body.
Give me your blessing. Defile my flesh with the seedbed curse, again and again, until it is done. Until a cursed ring coalesces and may one day defile order itself.
He was ready to die for his ambitions. That fact alone is indeed admirable. Everyone who is ready to die for their goal deserves praises. And yes,
I would disagree with that implicitly, but I don't really want to go too far down that rabbit hole, to be honest.
the process of defilement is really painful. But he endured that pain not once, not twice, but 5 times. To create mending rune we need to defile his flesh 5 times. And if we kill him without torturing and defilement, he would die in despair, as evident in Dung Eater puppet. The Dung Eater despaired at how he met his end, how hideous and sinister this puppet is, and yet its utter despair invites one to care for it. The Dung Eater's ending. First, we need to understand what his order means using in-game logic. He is trying to curse as many people as he can, and his other goal is to create another being like Dung Eater, who will continue his deeds.
Countless I have killed, and countless I have defiled, and soon the fruits will be born. Hundreds will be reborn cursed, and they'll bear thousands of cursed children, who bear tens of thousands more. A few of those will be born just like me, and they'll kill and defile and bless in my stead.
And about the curse nature. From Mending Rune of the Fell Curse, Loathsome Rune, gestated by the Dung Eater, used to restore the fractured Elden Ring when brandished by the Elden Lord. The reviled curse will last eternally, and the world's children, grandchildren, and every generation hence will be its pestilence. If order is defiled entirely, defilement is defilement no more, and for every curse, a cursed blessing. That means no need to torture people anymore to curse them. Instead of defiling individuals one by one, we can defile the order itself. Judging from the heart's design, the curse in question is Omen's curse. And because a curse is defined by gods, that means curse, which spreading by Elden Ring, is not a curse at all.
Oh no, Corn, welcome back in. You said even Dung Eater's voice actors from Down Under? Say it ain't so. And then Forgeborge, welcome back in. Cursed be the order, O penitent one in silence. Very well. So, one thing that I've been thinking about in relation to these two videos so far that I wish Levovit touched on a bit more, and maybe he'll get into it later, would be the mechanics in the mechanical implications of what it means to be cursed by the Dung Eater could be relevant to talk about, and what exactly his order might entail once everything is cursed. So, from what we know of the Dung Eater's curse, and what Blackguard said earlier, he curses people, does all sorts of crap to their soul souls so that way they won't go on to return to the Erdtree. And so Dung Eater's blessing may be seeking to grant everyone independence from Erdtree burial and rebirth and things like that, which might be an admirable thing if, depending on like how you view the Erdtree, whether or not it's symbiotic or parasitic or, you know, something entirely foreign to the natural order of the lands between. And then extending the lens out even further, the way that we interact with the Dung Eater within the paradigm of his own order, his justification for being able to spread his blessing is the fact that he's able to kill people and give them his blessing, so to speak. But once we're able to stop him, that actually pauses to make him think about the ethical ramifications of what he's doing, sort of, in a way. And I don't know why we lose memory for this. And let me refresh all this crap. In a certain sense, Dung Eater's order is very similar to that of the Crucible, if you believe that the whole might makes right is the paradigm that he's working from. But of course, that right there is very much the realm of headcanon, so Levelvit doesn't necessarily need to talk about that kind of thing, but that's just kind of my train of thought after like thinking about it a bit more from watching this video. Levo thinks he curses the Erdtree, and now when people reincarnate from the Erdtree, they become born cursed. They become omen. So in the long term, everyone becomes omen. Well, I would disagree with that because the Dung Eater's ideals as expressed in his armor are that he essentially has the heart of the omen, but without the appearance to match it. So I wouldn't imagine that people would become omen, at least in a literal sense, and that might not be what you're saying, but metaphorically they might be. So I would think that he would essentially break people away from the cycle of the tree by cursing the tree like you're saying here. So maybe what we're saying doesn't really contradict each other by any means. I just think that his goal is to cut off the process before it even goes back to the Erdtree, but you might be right. Okay, cool. You'll touch on that topic in a video later. Little Church says, the sky looks like modeling a little bit, and modeling is a curse related. It also looks quite similar to the way that the sky looks when you go into the Deathbed Companion dream and fight Dread Leech Dragon Fortisax in Fia's dream with Godwin. But we don't really know if that's intentionally related, the way that the two skies look, or if it's just a little bit of a coincidence.
It's now a blessing, even if the only thing that changed was a perspective. And from Seedbed Curse. By cursing people, Dung Eater prevents dead souls returning to the Erdtree.
Looks like I need to put my foot in my mouth a little bit.
Leaving them forever cursed. One of the most loathsome things found in the lands between. Dead people now will not return to the Erdtree. By the way, common misconception. It does not mean that people will be eternally wandering as cursed soul unable to return. People still can be reborn.
Hundreds will be reborn cursed.
So people can be reborn without Erdtree influence. And isn't that a good thing? It's pretty much a community headcanon that Erdtree or Elden Beast sucking vital energy from people reincarnating. Or it gives other benefits to greater reveal through our struggle as humanity rise. So even this aspect could be considered as good, depending on your perspective. We are working with three assumptions here. The Crucible symbolizes evolution. Omens embody negative random changes from evolution or diseases, and crucially, Dung Eater's motive carry no ill intent.
I'm going to back that up real quick.
Omens embody negative random changes from evolution or diseases.
I don't think I would agree with that, because it seems like the function, if not the purpose of the Crucible, was to blend all life together. So I wouldn't call that kind of a random sequence there as much as it is like intentionally, maybe not intentionally because we don't necessarily know if it has intent, but that might tie back into how I just kind of disagree with the notion that the Crucible is chaotic in the scientific sense of the term, even though it is certainly regarded as being chaotic by people in the world of the lands between it now that civilization has advanced further. The Hornsent culture seems like a counter argument to that. Could you elaborate? Because I'm not sure exactly how you mean that right now. Florge says that Dung Eater is the ultimate bringer of hope. Simply by removing all goodness and leaving desperation and sorrow, he leaves only room for hope to sprout. That, or he hates everybody. That's kind of a funny thing. But to be fair, like when we go back to that mending rune, it says, eventually, if everybody's cursed, the curse is no more, and there will be a blessing instead. Alright, so while Levo replies, I'll go ahead and continue watching.
And crucially, Dung Eater's motive carried no ill intent. He aimed to accomplish something beneficial. The core idea of Dung Eater's ending is that everyone will become an omen. But something odd, something really strange lies in Omen helm description. Malformed helm, resembling an omen with its horns cut off, worn by the Dung Eater. Their form is a vision of the landscape of his mind, and of his appearance as he wished to see it. The heart of an omen without the body to match. Could there be any crueler existence? What does it matter then, if the curse claims it all? Isn't that contradicting? Dung Eater wants to become like Omen, but his armor, the appearance he wished to see, looks like Omen with his horns cut. Why? Omen are defined by horns, and he wants specifically to be like Omen with horns amputated. So what is the third solution to our evolution problem? What is the metaphorical meaning of Dung Eater's ending? I think his ultimate goal is to overcome Omen's disease. His armors tell us that he wanted to be born Omen, but cut horns tell us that he doesn't want to live like Omen. So I truly believe that the whole point of Dung Eater's quest is to return the natural evolution into in-game world, which help us to overcome the Omen disease. Let's see his dialogue in that context.
That when they're reborn, they'll be cursed, along with their children, and their children's children, for all time to come.
These lines indicate that he wants to create as many random mutations as possible, as much life diversity as it could be. But something interesting comes after.
Alright, so Levo says, if Omen simply means bad, as you explained in the video, it doesn't seem to align with Hornsent culture. Their horns don't appear to be a struggle, instead they seem to provide advantages. I would kind of disagree with that, because when you consider the Hornsent Bairn, it says most of their children kind of die before they grow older, and only the most horned ones are like truly revered as like being super special. So there might be a little bit of survivorship bias going on there. But to be fair, you could make the argument that the entire philosophy of a crucible is one built upon survivorship bias. He wants all the drawbacks but none of the benefits then? Truly an enigma, kind of. But I don't know, like if you think about it, if curses are essentially just being infused with excessive life in the FromSoft games, if everybody was infused with excess life, would that be a literal curse or to be considered a curse? Arguably not, because that would essentially just be life at that point. But I don't know. This is such like a weird concept because the omen are born accursed, or they're born cursed rather, and they have like the wraiths within them which like haunt them, and that's presumably the same thing what Dung Eater is doing to people's souls. But once they're reborn, are they no longer cursed, or are they just like removed from the Erd tree and that's considered the curse? Do they still have like the spirits and whatnot ruining their dreams? I don't know. Without horns, nice to see you again. Even if you buy that Dung Eater's ending isn't bad and he doesn't intend anything bad by it, you not say he is without any ill intent. Yeah, there's only like a little bit of murder, but you could overlook that, right? Little Church Lore asks a great question. What is a curse? I think when you look back at the games, it becomes a little bit clearer that a curse is a miserable pile of secrets.
Fact, me, and I'm the Dung Eater. A few of those will be born just like me, and they'll kill and defile and bless in my stead.
Among those who will be omen, few will be born like Dung Eater, and we know he sees himself as omen with cut horns, so there would be people who are omens but born without horns. A similar analogy would be
born without horns, huh?
antidotes. To overcome poison, often one should endure it and survive the dose. Without tasting the poison, you will never get the antidotes for it. A very interesting piece of lore and possible Dung Eater's motivation lies in Sword of Milos. Sinister great sword, fashioned from a giant's backbone. Milos was undersized for a giant, and was viewed as sealed and terribly grotesque. I believe this is the answer to why the Dung Eater become like this, why he is so focused on evolution. Because he saw it. He saw the results of the broken current state of evolution right now. The once dangerous, almost godlike giants, and now undersized, grotesque, pathetic undersized giant, which was Milos. Dung Eater saw that. Everyone becomes weaker over time. There is no salvation from it. In the future, our seeds will be even weaker than we are. So maybe if we bring back the evolution, maybe we could avoid such a horrible fate in the future. I think Dung Eater's thoughts were something like that.
I can definitely appreciate that kind of look into Dung Eater's psyche here. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with it, but I do think there is enough room to make that kind of interpretation and kind of be able to stand on principle with that.
And finally, what is the blessing of despair that narrators tell us? I think this is pretty simple.
The fallen leaves tell a story of how a tarnished became Elden Lord in our home, across the fog, the lands between. Our seed will look back upon us and recall the reviled curse that defined our age, the blessing of despair.
As they say, hard times make strong men, I guess. But do you all really want to live in a world of shit?
I interpret these words as, in the future people will remember our age as not really good days, but that curse, that despair, which we endure will lead us to blessing. People in the future will be stronger. They will evolve. By our despair, our seeds will receive blessing. A similar concept appears in the story of Code Vein. There is a red mist in the world, serving as a barrier that protects humanity from formidable creatures lurking beyond. The main antagonist is Mido. His goal is to get rid of that red mist. He argues that exposing humanity to this danger would serve as a catalyst for our ultimate evolution. In the harsher environment, only the strongest could survive and reproduce, potentially accelerating human development. Only, of course, if humanity will be able to withstand the danger of the new world.
もうゆりかごは必要ないだろう。共に進化の階段を登ろうではないか。
It's not really the same as Dung Eaters, but ultimately their goal is the same. The only difference is that Mido chose to control outside factors, like the environment, and the Dung Eater chose to control the inside factor, the forceful mutations.
Outro.
Thank you all for sticking with me throughout this deep dive into the Dung Eater character. I wanted to keep things as simple as possible, and originally envisioned wrapping this theory up in about 30 minutes. But as you've seen, it's taken us 2 videos and over an hour to explore these concepts, even though I left out a lot. My apologies for the extended discourse, but I hope you found the journey worth the extra time. I must extend a special thanks for Crunchy and Ratatoskar. It was during their stream they discussed the concept of the Crucible as evolution. After a lot of thinking, I came up with this theory. Their insights have been invaluable in shaping this exploration. Now, I am eager to hear your thoughts on this topic. Do you agree with these interpretations presented, or do you see things differently?
So that's a very interesting question of whether or not the Crucible itself represents evolution. I do think there is enough textual support where one can kind of make that claim. I don't necessarily know if I'd agree that it would be like a definitive claim by any means. And, well, I do think there's a lot of sense to it. There's something nagging me about the idea of all life being blended together, which doesn't necessarily fit the criterion for evolution in my mind. And I'm not sure why. And I mean like evolution beyond the natural selection sense of the word, I guess. So like I was saying, I think on last night's stream, to me, in many ways, the Crucible might feel more like a stimulant, potentially towards evolution, than just the concept of evolution itself. And it is also weird to me that it's described as atavism, at least in the Crucible talismans. But to be fair, at least now with the DLC, the Hornsent item frustratingly calls it, well, it says like the Hornsent looked to it as the power of evolution, which isn't necessarily saying that it is evolution, but you actually have more support for this idea even after the DLC has come out. So yeah, you said the DLC added to that with the DNA like spirals. I don't necessarily think I would say that all of the Hornsent spirals are like DNA specifically, but certainly, DNA does spiral, so true story. Little Church says, there's also the Crucible Current, which confuses things for you too. Well, the Crucible Current isn't necessarily a thing as much as it is the Hornsent are rectifying the current, which means like controlling it and correcting it. So that has like a specific kind of context, because I certainly didn't understand it that way the first time I read the description, to be honest as well. There's textual indication that symptoms of the Crucible are marked by partial devolution. Exactly. Crucible contact. Okay. Adlai likes Ranny's ending better. It leaves more things to chance. Mikkel and Dung Eater just want to enforce their particular views on the world. I mean, in a way, like Ronnie's doing the same thing, but she's just a little bit more laissez-faire about it, which can certainly be more preferable if you don't want to be controlled by other people. So, okay.
Please leave your comments below. I am looking forward to reading your perspective and engaging in some fascinating discussions. Looking ahead, the next video will be released around the 12th or 13th of June. Just in time for the upcoming DLC. We'll be exploring the Shadowlands theory, and you don't want to miss it. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to stay updated with all the latest content. Once again, thank you for your time and attention. Your support means the world to me, and I am excited to continue this journey with you all. Until next time, keep questioning, keep theorizing, and as always, keep exploring the depths of the lore we have yet to fully understand.
Alright, yeah, I enjoyed that video, and also a little bit of feedback. Could you bother to spend any runes, bro? No, but in all seriousness, I did enjoy the video. I've gone ahead and shared it with chat. I'll leave a comment to get you a little bit more algorithmic push. This seems like the kind of video that somebody who eats poop would make. So, hope you enjoyed that. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive on into the next video with Acer Aesthetics. Nope, that's not it. Did I not have this in the right order? It should be Acer Aesthetics Enlightenment Themes of From Software 2. Adlai's gonna reply to my comment? Okay. What have I started? Alright. And Acer says, this video contains spoilers for the extended From Software library of games. Oh wow, Levo, thank you so much for the additional 10 subs. So that's been 20 total. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate that. And, you know, just keep on doing what you're doing, making the videos, and I will keep disagreeing with you about them. But yeah, no, I definitely appreciate that. It's very kind and generous of you. So, familiarity with all of the FromSoft games is assumed going forwards. So, congrats everybody who managed to grab one of those gifted memberships. And enjoy the emotes, which I should look into potentially adding more, but I'm just kind of lazy and forget quite a bit. Enlightenment.
The Valley of Defilement is home to all the unwanted things of the world. The reigning order and its adherents could not find a place for everything or everyone, and so all the things unwanted came to reside here, where they can fester and rot together. A saint from the church has come to the valley, Maiden Astrea, and it is to her that the discarded peoples of the valley search to have their pain removed. In Demon Souls, the soul grants men clarity, and in removing the souls of those who suffer in the valley, Maiden Astrea also removes that clarity and frees these people from the consciousness of their agony. The setting is brimming with the idea of impurity, Kegare, but Maiden Astrea's story and the philosophical conundrum of her actions is not framed there so much as it is in the mind, which is strange because the valley, on a quick glance, doesn't seem to be exploring the conflict of the mind radiating even when surrounded by the impurity of the world. It's subdued.
Sorry, my browser stuff keeps crashing on me. It's really annoying. So I might have also been missing messages because I had to refresh chat and it was on top chat instead of live. So if you guys commented something and I did not see it earlier, I apologize. Don't know why this keeps happening. Maybe I really do need to like disable some things. Anyway, I'll try to remember to take care of that later, I guess. So I'm gonna back up the video slightly. Right, yeah, because now I can type and whatnot. Forge said there was once a stream with 12 people watching. Someone gifted 10 subs, and guess who didn't get one? To be fair, I don't think YouTube and or Twitch even necessarily give it to users who are actively online as much as they are people who've been in the stream recently, whether or not they've been lurking or just passing through. All right, Forgeborge, you have a good night. I did see it. I just forgot to say anything, but thanks for dropping by, and you take care. Yeah, maybe if you guys weren't so Kegare, you would have gotten those gifted memberships. All right, let's back up. If I can.
On a quick glance, doesn't seem to be exploring the conflict of the mind radiating even when surrounded by the impurity of the world. It's subdued, but it is there. Do you like snails? They're interesting. And in Bloodborne, they're essentially made to be From Software's antithesis to the centipedes. The latter is seen in that game's vermin. It's seen in the centipede demon of Dark Souls, in the Saint of the Bud, and the Halleck from Elden Ring. We see it in Sekiro's Impure Immortals, and in...
I don't know what's going on. Because I don't even think this is a YouTube thing anymore.
In Demon Souls, we see it in Latria. What unifies the appearance of the centipede across all of these games is how they are a stand-in for impurity. When you see the centipede, you're never far from it, but the snail is symbolic for enlightenment. In Bloodborne, we see ethereal snails flowing from the skull of Madman's knowledge, and snails and slugs are repeated symbols in the items which are affiliated with the Great Ones and phantasms. And in Demon Souls, snails also connect to the idea of enlightenment and the mind. The snails we encounter in the Shrine of Storms live in a glowing pool of souls. Remember that in this game the soul is clarity, and the snails of the valley are seen hugging the large sword of moonlight. Because Demon Souls links souls and the mind,
Maybe it is a little bit of YouTube after all.
Soul pool snails in the Shrine of Storms are easy to...
This is so annoying with the frame rate and everything.
Connect to it as well, but the ones in...
There's just no way. I need to really figure out what's going on with this.
The valley maybe need a helping hand. An internet fable of the Buddha says...
Hey, Mike Bailey, welcome back in. You're saying that the OG Demon Souls looks so different from the remake. That's true. I've not played the original, but I've seen enough footage to just realize how much like darker and more ambient the environments are. Have I cleared my cache lately? Probably not on this browser because I pretty much just use it mostly for the purposes of stream or like Google Docs for stream channel purposes essentially, but that might not be a bad idea, I guess. All right, so let's go ahead and make that big and then start.
Glowing pool of souls. Remember that in this game the soul is clarity, and the snails of the valley are seen hugging the large sword of moonlight. Because Demon Souls links souls and the mind, the soul pool snails in the Shrine of Storms are easy to connect to it as well, but the ones in the valley maybe need a helping hand. An internet fable of the Buddha says that one day he was meditating using a tree's shadow as protection from the heat. But as time passed, the sun's placement in the sky changed so that eventually it shone directly on his bald head. A wandering snail saw this and feared that the heat would disrupt the Buddha's meditation, so he made his way to the Buddha's head and sacrificed his life to cool him down. Other snails saw and followed until 108 had sacrificed themselves for this task.
I wonder why 108, and that makes me wonder if there's any mystical connection to how there's 108 stars of destiny in the Suikoden games, and that might be like a Chinese thing, or maybe it's like Hindu, but like maybe I should say Indian instead, because Buddhism is literally not Hinduism. So yeah, I'm just kind of wondering about that now. It'd be cool if the original was likely on modern consoles.
When someone observed that the
water margin, that's Suikoden, yes.
Buddha is often displayed with spiral curls. Whether this fable is true or not, I figure that those
is a frickin' course, bro.
who pursue enlightenment might get a kick out of how unshackled from the physical world snails are. They live without a structured formal outline and are capable of adapting and reshaping themselves to whatever occasion arises. Snails are a special creature. Bloodborne tells the story of the old blood, which makes the human body malleable, and it uses snail imagery whenever it needs to quickly connect something to the arcane. It also tells the story of enlightenment, of scholars who pursue it and the lengths they go to see their dreams of a celestial awakening realized. Like the snails in the Valley of Defilement, the scholars in Bloodborne are attracted to the moonlight. And
So I do have other potentially differing thoughts about the snails that I will hopefully get to, and we'll probably go into like my whole like phantasm video idea eventually. I am curious to see how much more Acer can like flesh these ideas out about connecting snails to the moonlight in general. And I do like the story of comparing the snails' concern for Buddha as kind of existing perhaps on the path to enlightenment. And then there's other like Buddhist stories that tie enlightenment with the moon, and that the moon can represent the path to enlightenment and whatnot. So obviously in that story, the snails didn't have anything to do with the moonlight, but maybe he'll get to those points later on. So Alexander was asking, what are my thoughts on Suikoden 3? So it's a little bit complicated. I think Suikoden 3 is simultaneously terrible and great. I think a first playthrough of Suikoden 3 is pretty damn good, especially if you go out of your way to get like the secret ending out of the way and whatnot. But I think second and third playthroughs and so on and so forth, subsequent playthroughs, that was the word, subsequent playthroughs get ruined by the intro and the three stories having to coincide the way that they do. But yeah. So it's probably like my least favorite of the 4 Suikoden games that I've played, which it isn't a bad game by any means. Anyway. At least it's
the reason for
easy
this
to emulate.
is because the moon is a stand-in for enlightenment.
Hey, he's getting there. Okay, damn it.
Just like how centipedes are a stand-in for impurity.
How?
There is something beautiful about sacrificing one's self to preserve.
This is terrible. The thing that's really annoying me the most about this, and maybe this is partly a me problem because I don't do it when I'm not streaming, obviously, but I don't have this problem when I'm not streaming, but when I don't stream, I'm also not like pausing it every 30 seconds to talk for a minute. Oh, it's probably on auto again, huh? Yeah, okay. Let's just go to 240, because screw me, right? It's not the ISP, otherwise you guys wouldn't be able to like watch my stream. Most likely. I mean, of course, upload is different from download, but I actually have extremely good download bandwidth, but just terrible upload, which is why I have to stream at 720p. But like, it annoys me because it tells me on the damn toolbar that, hey, look, we've got this much buffered. But why is it when I scroll down to the comments, it consistently works at that point? I just feel like a broken record complaining about all this.
It also tells the story of enlightenment, of scholars who pursue it and the lengths they go to see their dreams of a celestial awakening realized. Like the snails in the Valley of Defilement, the scholars in Bloodborne are attracted to the moonlight. And the reason for this is because the moon is a stand-in for enlightenment, just like how centipedes are a stand-in for impurity.
Okay, folks, I think I'm going to go AFK, like try to like close the browser, maybe refresh the cache and figure that out. So give me like a minute and a half, hopefully. So be right back. And this is why I tend to not parry. It's because I'm trash. I done goofed. I felt like I should have blocked that. Anyway, I should probably rely more on dodging, and then I was just slow. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay, there's a spot to stand. Okay, that's kind of nice. I should have dodged. I felt like I was way early for that. Alright, yeah, I screwed up. Lie or die? Gotta go for it. Oh, that's different. I don't remember him actually taking his head off. He's kicking my ass now. Oh, I was not expecting that direction. I'm gonna die. See, I felt like I blocked way too early, but I felt like I blocked in time, but apparently that wasn't time enough. Oh, I was way too early with that, apparently. I felt like I probably should have stopped and died again just to get a bit more practice, though, to be honest. Alright, hopefully that works. Let me hard refresh this now. Actually, I had to freaking Google how to delete the cache because I've never done that with Chrome. So hopefully, let's get off freaking auto. Hopefully this works. Otherwise, I'll pull my hair out.
Suet and the lengths they go to see their dreams of a celestial awakening realized. Like the snails in the Valley of Defilement, the scholars in Bloodborne are attracted to the moonlight. And the reason for this is because the moon is a stand-in for enlightenment, just like how centipedes are a stand-in for impurity. There is something beautiful about sacrifice.
I forgot the captions again, so let me put those back on.
Sacrificing one's self to preserve what little light the dark places of the world have, but it is horrifying to watch that image be twisted by those who have confused themselves about what the light is. In this video, we'll be discussing enlightenment, and the moon and the mind, the cosmos.
Why?
And all those things which hover above, which do not sink and stack.
This is almost to the point where it's like unwatchable, and I'm considering like doing this tomorrow instead and like trying to figure out what's going on. But I can't let it load for a while. Like the thing is, the way that the internet works now, it doesn't continue to buffer things after a certain point. And like it's not a buffering thing because it should work regardless of whether or not I scroll down to the comment section or not. Do I have another browser? Yes, but I don't have it like set up for like stream stuff by any means. It's like this should not work,
but instead
but
are reflected on a water's surface. Impurities can lie in the bottom of a lake, but however great the seedbed might be, the impurities cannot touch the moon's reflection. Just like how a truly enlightened mind cannot be tainted by the poisonous lure of attachment.
Maybe I can download the video? Maybe.
This is me,
actually,
dear
that might
old
not be a bad
Uncle
idea.
Acer Aesthetics. Hope you have a cup of coffee on hand. Let's dive in.
All right, let's see if I can download this in the meantime. Oh yeah, download. All right, so we'll worry about that later. Is it going? Not like this. All right, so anyway, while that downloads, I guess I will let this, buffer or whatnot. I'll just leave it as it is and check out what you guys are saying in the chat. So, would it break the stream to refresh the page? Not entirely. I don't know what'll happen if I close like my browser where I have like my stream embedded into YouTube, because it's kind of weird how OBS has to interface into it, but I can close this page and it won't like break the stream or anything. So yeah. Can we watch Coco Melon or Mr. Beast while we wait? I have no idea who Coco Melon is, and I don't particularly care. for Mr. Beast. I haven't really watched anything, but I've just never been truly enticed to watch any of those videos. All right, so give me 1 second and I will try to get the actual video queued up. So good suggestion again. Bluey. I actually don't even really know what that is.
From King
The
Alan.
Tomb of the Giants is a pretty scary area, especially on a first playthrough. I'll just go ahead and say it so we get cursed. I do kind of remember the layout of the area, but a lot of the specifics are hard to remember. Byhander, and I think as we start to go down now, we get shot at, if we're not being shot at right now. Okay. I thought there was a way to fall there. Shows how well I actually remember that layout. Actually, let's try to be smart for once. Wait, I don't think I have any of the prism stones. That's all of my stones are in Dark Souls 3. I think it's a little bit further to the left. Spamming the R2. We said we're gonna go about this normal style. It's actually going this way. And then we slide down here and make a right. Oh, it's this one, isn't it? That we just dropped down. Okay, so I was misremembering where. So now we should be like right by the bonfire.
Before
It's
you
like down
embark,
there. Yeah.
are a stand-in.
Alright guys, I figured it out. It took me an embarrassingly long time to figure it out because I've never downloaded a video from YouTube before. But apparently if you have premium and you download, you need to go into the download tab to find them. I was like, I don't find this in my download section at all because apparently it doesn't really download. I don't know what's going on with this. The Dung Eater video defiled the stream with Kagare, pretty much. Okay, so this is a little bit earlier than where we were in the stream, but hopefully that'll just, help refresh our memory. I might just...
For impurity.
I'm going to back up even further just because of how crappy this experience was, and that's a little bit unfair to Acer. All right, so let's go from here. And of course we have to buffer still? I don't understand. You got to be joking me. This... What? Let's turn this tab off.
What unifies the appearance of
downloaded anymore? Yes, okay.
the centipede across all of these games is how they are a stand-in for impurity. When you see the centipede, you're never far from it, but the snail is symbolic for enlightenment. In Bloodborne, we see ethereal snails flowing from the
This does not seem right.
from the skull of madman's knowledge, and snails and slugs are a stand-in for impurity. There is something beautiful about sacrificing one's self to preserve what little light the dark places of the world have, but it is horrifying.
Okay, so I wonder if my settings when I was trying to play it earlier affected things here, so I think we might be stuck at 480p. Whoopsies. Yeah, a downloaded video that needs to buffer. It seems like... I don't understand this at all. Yeah, you can't watch it without the internet. So this does not get saved to one's computer. It's like its own separate place where they store videos for you. So maybe it's like a higher server priority setting. I don't know. This is so backwards to me. Who at Google have I pissed off? Good question. Maybe everybody for not getting more views.
Trying to watch that image be twisted by those who have confused themselves about what the light is. In this video, We'll be discussing enlightenment, and the moon, and the mind, the cosmos, and all those things which hover above, which do not sink and stagnate, but instead are reflected on a water's surface. Impurities can lie in the bottom of a lake, but however great the seabed might be, the impurities cannot touch the moon's reflection. Just like how a truly enlightened mind cannot be tainted by the poisonous lure of attachment. Hi.
Lure of Omicron Persei 8.
This is me, dear old Uncle Acer Aesthetics. Hope you have a cup of coffee on hand. Let's dive in.
Enlightenment. The sky and the cosmos are one.
From King Alat in Demon Souls all the way through to the Research Institute in Fires of Rubicon, in these games we are constantly being met with those who seek to learn more about the nature of the world. What is revealed to those who pry deep into concealed truth is often more horrifying than they could have ever imagined, and they can never go back because the search for the truth changes them. On day one, the madman in Bloodborne might have never thought to knowingly spread the beast plague in Yharnam, but every incremental step they took towards realizing their dreams of ascension made them accept more and more horrors. When they first discovered the Old Blood in the Chalice dungeons, all they knew was that it blurred the boundaries of their lives, but it must have not been long before they saw that overindulgence in the stuff eventually shatters the physical form and reshapes people into beasts. No problem, keep it isolated from the world at large and continue to study it. That was the idea with Bergenworth, but just like how the search for knowledge changes a man, it also changes an institution, and Provost Willem, the headmaster of the place, was in the end not able to restrain his students' impulses for knowledge. On day one, this wasn't the plan. So I wonder, in Demon Souls, did Alant search for the Old One and the Soul Arts because he wanted to destroy mankind, or is that the conclusion he reached after bringing the Soul Arts back and seeing what men made of them?
So this might not be too... I can't even look forward to it's going to be on the screen. Damn it. I was going to see what all he had showing on screen before I made this point, because he might come back to it later. But ironically enough, and in many ways in favor of some of the points that Acer is bringing up right here, is that Bergenworth didn't necessarily go into the underground tombs in search of the Old Blood or anything like that. And the inquiry into the cosmos began with their interaction with phantasms, or essentially like the slugs, as he's pointing out here right now. How it's downloaded or not. Oh my god. This is trash, man. Can I even go to 638? Oh no, now I'm just on the actual video itself.
Are a stand-in for impurity. There is something beautiful about sacrificing one's self to preserve what little light the dark
Guys, this is the worst. I can't even pause an allegedly downloaded video. Time to break out tube to MP4 sites? Almost, man. It's like, damn, here I am, spending money to try to, do things on the up and up and make sure that you guys don't have to watch ads vicariously through me, and I'm just getting pooped on. It sure is the world. And then Nobit, welcome into the stream. Sorry for the experience, but thanks for the message. Is it bad if you suggest another program to download the video? So I would, ethically, I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but at least for you guys doing your own thing. But as far as the conduction of my stream goes, I wanted to all be on the up and up and be legal, and to not run into any trouble with YouTube or Google, who is hosting my channel and whatnot. So I'm going to kind of not do that for the sake of my own channel and whatnot. Yeah. And then Koi Pop, welcome back in. Don't ever sincerely patronize YouTube. It's folly. I mean, it's not so much patronizing YouTube or patronizing YouTube as much as it is covering my ass, And so, yeah. Nobody see what you wrote above. This is so silly. Okay, I guess we're going to go back to the real video, or not? Nope, we're working.
The search for truth changes you, and so before you embark, be sure that you're okay with any outcome you might reach on the other end, because what is revealed might be best left unknown.
You know, I almost, why did I pause it? I almost mentioned this earlier in stream, but there's something about the quality of Acer's voice which kind of reminds me of Rod Serling, the narrator / host of the original Twilight Zone. And obviously, they come from different parts of the world, but he's just kind of got that vocal quality, which reminds me of it.
Something shared by Alant and the Mensis scholars is that their views are not entirely changed, only their tolerance for evil. In the end, Alant does not judge mankind by a framework or standard he's recently developed. He sees humans acting like demons and judges them by the human morality he has. Mikolash is clearly insane, but he is still trying to ascend. These men have changed, but their failure to become more might be down to how they hold on to all their too human perspective, even after they should be adequately developed from who they were when the pursuit of knowledge and power began. Perhaps knowledge is best approached ex nihilo. Start from nothing. Abandon your attachment to everything you take for granted, because every notion and perspective you will have at the end of your journey will be those which justified themselves on their own merit. Uncomfortable truths must not be avoided, comforting lies must not be suffered. In Elden Ring, this conflict of the pain of knowledge is exemplified in the story of Goldmask. He saw that there was something not right in the Golden Order, and when he was confronted with the contradiction that Marika was the one true god, but also that Radahn and Marika were one and the same, he did not despair. He realized the ramifications of the lie and sought to remedy the situation.
And this is kind of one of my favorite parts of the cosmology of Elden Ring, where Golden Order fundamentalism represents the marriage of knowledge and faith in a kind of literal sense. And so Goldmask never really wavered because he knew, like, hey, if I'm doing my knowledge right, we're going to get to the right answer. And he just kind of sticks with his convictions and his machinations, even if I think ultimately that process has its own set of flaws, which Goldmask may be overlooking there. At least as far as his
to understand
is
his story and the greater ramifications of its actors in the greater context of Elden Ring, I think it's important to talk about the finger pointing at the moon. The finger pointing at the moon.
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite parables to bring up in relation to Bloodborne, and I brought this up when I was talking about Smotown's video on the Tumerians, and then I kind of clipped what I had and just kind of lazily put that up as my own video on the subject, because it was something that I wanted to make a video of in the past, but didn't necessarily have the energy to go through all that effort. So I felt like me just talking about it quickly enough could, at least throw that idea out there a bit more. So I'm glad Acer is covering it here in a more organized fashion.
Moon is,
and before we go too much further, I think this kind of idea or motif also gets what's the word, brought up, shown off, displayed, I can't think of it. Anyway, it can also show up in the Witcher novels. I don't know if it's in the games because I haven't played the Witcher games, but there's some sorcerer dude who says don't mistake the stars in the lake for the cosmos, which is essentially the same image or idea that we're about to get here in a moment.
Is a Buddhist idea. A Zen master who is instructing his students points to the moon and uses it as a stand-in for enlightenment. He then says that the Buddha's teachings are like a finger pointing to the moon. Through the teachings and the right living, one may reach enlightenment. However, it is essential to not confuse the finger for the moon. The finger is how you're made to look at the moon, it's not what you're meant to be looking at. This story illustrates how the meaning is more important than the method. I discussed a very similar idea in the Silent Hill 3 commentary all those years ago, when I talked about skillful means. The idea there was that the practice one undertakes to achieve enlightenment is not something to ultimately get hung up on. Different tools for different paths. If you need to cross a river, a boat is a good tool. If you need to cross a mountain, a boat is a terrible tool. It is the destination we must keep in mind and staying true to reaching it. Getting hung up on the how is not useful. And the finger pointing at the moon story has the same concept applied to the sutras themselves. The sutra points to enlightenment like a finger points to the moon. You're not meant to look at the finger, it's just there to get you to see the moon.
Right, and then Hilko, welcome back into the stream. So, Dr. K, we talked about him on one of the more recent streams. He also likes to bring up a story that he learned from his time in an ashram to try to become like a monk, essentially. And there's the story of the ashram having like a bunch of cats, or a cat, that would try to jump on over everybody while they're trying to meditate. And so the head leader of the ashram told his students, oh, before you meditate, make sure you put the cat outside. Well, eventually the head of the ashram dies, the students change out, the cat gets replaced, and then it just becomes a bit of a tradition in the ashram for them to put the cat outside before they do their meditation for the day. After a point, this gets so far removed from the original purpose of it that another cat further and further down on the line dies, and so they don't have a cat to put outside before they can meditate. Oh no, what are they going to do? Completely oblivious to the fact that the reason that they put the cat outside was just so that it wouldn't disturb them while they're meditating. It's not as though they can't meditate if they don't put a cat outside. So that kind of idea is represented in that whole don't mistake the finger pointing for the moon for like the path to enlightenment.
Gold Mask travels the lands between in search of the truth of the Golden Order, and he is followed by his would-be student Corrin. Gold Mask is in communion with the greater will with the movement of his fingers, like the two fingers are. The lands between are seen over by the two fingers, who speak to the greater will and communicate its message to the finger readers. The world has so lost the plot that they are literally doing the bidding of the finger, which points to the moon/greater will. As Goldmask begins to unravel more and more of the contradictions of the Golden Order, the movement of his fingers stops entirely.
I do like that comparison of the fingers pointing like a broken path toward the moon and like the finger readers just trying to blindly follow them. Literally, they have no eyes. And that might be true to an extent, but I don't know how true it would be. And of course, like I am like one of the biggest doubters of the fingers to begin with, so even though I'm a doubter, I still do think that there is a possibility that the fingers could be right and could just be trying to relay information to the tarnished in an altruistic way, but there's always that bit of a seed of doubt for me.
This causes Corrin a great deal of distress, because he is looking at the fingers, not what their movement represents. And unless we offer him the tonic of forgetfulness, his inability to truly question the world will end with him slaying Goldmask, stating he was nothing more than a madman forever.
And this isn't too important, and it seemed, based off of Acer's last comments, he might not be the most intimately familiar with the lore of Elden Ring and like the quest triggers, but Corrin doesn't necessarily kill Goldmask, because you can kill Goldmask and he will still die at the end of his quest. You can kill Corrin and Goldmask will still die at the end of his quest line, provided you do it at the right spot, if I'm remembering correctly.
Questioning the perfection of the Golden Order. But the Golden Order is flawed. If intentional, the story of Goldmask, Corrin, and Elden Ring's two fingers is the most blatant implementation of the lesson of the finger pointing at the moon FromSoft has yet included in their games. No, Goldmask is not.
And I would also make the argument that you could argue the make contact gesture could be a reference to the finger pointing at the moon, because you literally point up toward the sky and then you kind of switch your fingers pointing toward the sky in front of the brain of Mensis and get the moon rune. So that could be a little bit more arguable, but I don't really think that matters too much. I'm just being pedantic.
pointing at the...
Oh no, the Game Awards has used the middle finger toward us and several East Asian developers. The most loathsome finger of all.
Literal moon. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to ask that everybody imbibes the lesson of the finger pointing at the moon story. The moon is not literally the moon, it is the concept of enlightenment. Gold Mask is pointing to reach a truth. That is what matters. Whether it's...
Do we have any UK chatters in the stream? Because if so, I have a question for you guys, and there's a little bit of a story that goes along with this, which is pretty silly, but you guys might be able to elucidate me on some of the details. So one of the running jokes that I make about the two fingers is essentially that they represent George R.R. Martin or Hidetaka Miyazaki giving us like the bird gesture, as far as it's done in the UK, where they pretty much just use like a backwards peace sign to say up yours instead of like the middle finger. So Mike Bailey's from the UK. Is there a specific name for that gesture, the way that you guys do it, rather than like the middle finger itself? There's a video about that archived on my channel. About what? The Hote thing? So that's the one where I was watching Smotown's video about the two Marians, and then I brought up Hote pointing to the moon. Yes. So that is on my channel. It's on like the main section as well. Shouldn't it be a V? Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at a peace sign, it's essentially a V. So if it has like a specific name, I'd like to know, but if not, it's not that big of a deal. And then Mappy, welcome back in.
It's called enlightenment or wisdom or ascension or the eldritch truth. The idea is the same. There's something just out of humanity's reach, and the scholars risk everything pursuing it.
All right, so Adlai asks, what would the third finger be in the three fingers? All right, so take your index finger, your middle finger, and your ring finger and put them together and look at them closely. Now go ahead and read between the lines.
In most cases I'll discuss, the moon will feature heavily and be deeply tied to the idea of enlightenment, but for Gold Mask, we'll accept that the Earth Tree suffices. The reason to pursue enlightenment is to escape the suffering of life. Existence is cyclical. The human soul is passed through the cycle of the world over and over again because it has committed the cardinal error of attaching itself to the world. Whether emotionally or materially, attachment binds you to the cycle of reincarnation, and enlightenment is the escape. The scholars in Bloodborne pursue enlightenment and ascension to great onehood, but they are responsible for the beast plague and the hunts. Every so often, the beast problem becomes so hectic that hunters are needed to put them down. This is the suffering in the world of Bloodborne. When you look at illustrations of the Wheel of Samsara, you will see the moon hovering above it. An enlightened mind can escape the cycle of samsara and ascend to reach nirvana. The self is an illusion, a dream we can awaken from. The awakening, or bodhi, is how you reach nirvana. No more illusion of self, no more dreaming.
You will die, forget the dream, and awake under the morning sun. You will be freed from this terrible hunter's dream.
If all you wanted from this video was the core idea, that the moon is tied to enlightenment and that enlightenment is the escape from the cycle of reincarnation, there you have it. But if you want to dig deeper and perhaps see just how FromSoft applies, twists, and subverts this theme, keep watching.
Yeah, that's... Okay, those who study the moon, I'm assuming he's going to get into like Seath and Logan and whatnot, and I was going to touch on it briefly. I don't want to get like step on his toes too much, but it is interesting to me that we do have characters who do try to study enlightenment and the moon as a kind of a guide toward it, who end up like falling off the path and failing to become enlightened like Seath, although part of the reason Seath seems to fail is because of his attachment, which is why he's like not even a true dragon. And I'm assuming Acer is going to, get into that as well. And then Paisan, welcome back to the stream.
The moon is symbolic for enlightenment, so the scholars in these games often look to it. In Bloodborne, the scholars of Byrgenwerth pried into the eldritch truth and hunted the Great Ones to uncover their secrets. They wished to ascend, and to accomplish that, they experimented with the Old Blood. Provost Willem believed the repeated failure to ascend lay in the pitiful state of mankind's minds. He believed that what was needed was not more Old Blood, but rather meditation. Before you make your form malleable, you must grow eyes inside, must gain insight, and what will result when you then do ingest the Old Blood will be transcendence. But this caused a rift within Byrgenwerth. Lawrence, the main...
Now, for stuff like this, I do kind of wish that Acer had either the quotes that he's pulling them from, or at least the item names somewhere on the screen for people to kind of, not necessarily fact check, but if they wanted to, they could like look into it for their own insatiable curiosity.
Villain of Bloodborne wasn't interested in spending years meditating on the hope that Willem was right. He saw that time better spent trying to reach ascension through trial and error. Before they parted ways, Willem told him to remember their adage.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood.
And I do wish they kind of kept like the earlier draft of the adage where it's like, we're born of the blood, made men by the blood, and then made men no longer by the blood, or something like that, or made men no more, something along those lines, because it kind of builds more naturally into that idea of transcending humanity, I think. Which isn't to say that what we have now is bad, it's just a little bit more removed. That's how it is in the Japanese, essentially. And the weird thing is, there was one of the earliest trailers of Bloodborne where it had like the older version of this in English, so they changed it for some reason, which I don't understand. But, you know, there's probably a story behind that.
Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood.
But in the original Japanese, the saying is more like, the blood makes us human, makes us human no more.
Obviously, I didn't know that was about to come in the stream, so whoopsies.
The core difference, lost in translation, is that the blood makes us human no more. Because that's not being undone, that's just changing. And because it makes us human no more, and because our eyes are yet to open, we should fear the old blood. Lawrence told Willem he would remember the Byrgenwerth adage, but when we get to Yharnam and see what he created, there's scant mentions of enlightenment but a plethora of old blood. The people here say their farewells by mentioning blood. I've often noted how I really like the mid-game reveal that it's all eldritch gods and such, but that was a plot twist is actually a really interesting piece of storytelling. The church doesn't worship enlightenment, it worships the blood. If we go back to the finger pointing at the moon, Lawrence and the healing church confused the old blood for ascension, like how the student might confuse the master's finger for the moon.
And of course, that can also be argued depending on how one wants to look at the characters of Micolash and the School of Mensis at large, and or the choir. So Micolash wanted eyes on the inside, and the School of Mensis's strategy in employing that would be using the cries of an infant Great One to come into contact with a greater Great One, I guess. But that didn't work out as well as they intended, and rather than truly gaining like proper enlightenment, they kind of just went mad or transformed into terrible nightmare creatures, essentially. So Acer isn't exactly wrong about like the healing church, but it does seem that beyond Lawrence, their scholarship didn't entirely end once they got hold of the old blood and whatnot.
After the healing church took over Yharnam, it followed in Byrgenwerth's footsteps and had its own schism, Mensis and the choir. Mensis was formed by the hardliners who believed the problem was that the church wasn't experimenting enough, and they wanted to just brute force ascension. To that end, they perform a ritual to draw the moon to them. They wish for the red moon to descend such that they can be granted an audience with the Great One so that it can grant their wishes to be given insight. They want brains with eyes. And after the red moon fries their brains, Murgo's wet nurse delivers on this request. In the most literal sense possible, Mensis is given a brain with eyes. I talked in my Kegure video about how I think that these game worlds have their themes folded in them, specifically with Elevation and Kegure. So Mensis is the Impurity faction, and they are located in the lowest elevation of the game. But there's another layer to this. Enlightenment and the moon hover above, so the closer you are to the cosmos, the closer you are to the truth of the world. That might be why the summoning of the One Reborn, in the Advent Plaza, starts with the moon itself being blotted out with a black smoke, because for Mensis, Enlightenment was not meant to be. The choir is aligned more so with the ideas of Willem, and to that end, they're located in the highest elevation, outside of the nightmares, close to the moon. Willem also sought to be close to the moon. Reaching him is quite a descent, maybe even more so than the Advent Plaza now that I think about it. The themes with Elevation bit I just went into still applies if you consider there's a cosmic-looking centipede, Kegure, outside of Birkenworth, perhaps symbolizing a sort of deviant or corrupted enlightenment, or enlightened corruption. Not sure, but Birkenworth is still very moon-coded and Willem is intrigued by the moon. His balcony is a tsukimi, Japanese for moon-viewing platform, and
I thought he said zucchini, like the vegetable. I had to look back up at the captions to parse what he was saying.
Choir.
It doesn't help that it's misspelled because it should have a T, but I'm pretty sure these are just auto captions anyway.
Also has a tsukimi. It's where we pick up the make contact gesture and it's facing the astral clock tower. And just like how the centipede in Bergenworth might symbolize a corruption in the institution of learning, the astral clock tower might symbolize a flaw in the choir's approach. The hunter's nightmare was born from the curse of Cause. The curse bears the mark of the blood-drunk hunters. The eye begins to melt and more irises pop up in the eye. That's also the icon which Elden Ring uses for madness, and the moon in the nightmare has this effect applied to it as well.
All right, so I wanted to see where he was going before I interjected, because a lot of this stuff is going to be arguable, but to a certain extent, I would disagree with the Elevation argument, because I feel like it can be curtailed to work any which way, which means I don't think the Elevation argument really works. And to give some more examples about that, while you might make the argument that Yahar'gul is in the lowest part of Yharnam, which is sort of true to an extent, the Nightmare of Mensis eventually reaches the highest elevation point of the nightmare. So you might be able to make the argument that through combing the depths of depravity, they are ascended into the nightmare realm, which is one way of looking at things. And then conversely, while the choir kind of starts out in the orphanage above everyone else, next to the sky, essentially, because that's the thing that they were interested in, when you try to plume the depths of the choir, you eventually go so far beneath the Grand Cathedral that you would certainly be even further beneath Yahar'gul, which might go to tie into how Abritus, the daughter of the cosmos, is locked down deep, deep below underground. And of course, her involvement or relation to the Tumerian Chalice dungeons might also be noteworthy. And then, of course, that ties back into Bergenworth, where while they were researching the arcane cosmos potentially, or just the arcane in general, the way they decided to go about doing that was going underground rather than upwards toward the sky for ascension in their enlightenment. So, moving from that tracked into a bit of a different direction, when you look at the concept of the elevation as it relates to bodies of water, or maybe not bodies of water, bodies to fluids, then you have the impurities settling down deep below at the bottom of the sea, and then the deep sea serves as a bulwark for the eldritch truth, and then those who are seeking the eldritch truth need to go beyond the depths, is essentially what those runes are trying to say, and a little bit of that is obscured somewhat by translation. So, long story short, with the sky and the cosmos being one, and the way to reach the cosmos essentially being going beyond the depths of even like the deep sea, I think Bloodborne is saying that the cosmos is essentially everywhere, no matter where you try to look for it, and it can be justified in different ways, provided you are truly on the path to enlightenment, if that makes any sense. Adlai says, you don't think they were searching for enlightenment? They were searching for knowledge to reach somewhere else. Well, that's kind of splitting hairs a little bit, becoming a little bit perhaps too semantic, because for them, the pursuit of knowledge was on the path to ultimate enlightenment and divinity, because it's not as though they were stopping just for, or they were not embarking on their quest just for the sake of knowledge. I mean, maybe they were, but they did eventually end up having the end goal of gaining the thoughts of a great one, at least as far as Willem is concerned. And then arguably with like the School of Mensis, they wanted to become great ones, and the choir may have wanted to come into contact with great ones to liaise with. It's kind of up in the air with them. And Adlai also brings up the good point that the Tumerians, who were allegedly more advanced than the humans, were deep below Yharnam, so you don't think placement had a lot to do with like elevation. True story. Paisan says, elevation does seem to have some significance within the nightmare realms for some reason. Sure, if you want to make the argument that elevation is a little bit more important to the nightmare, that might be true to an extent. We don't know like if they recur to any degree, or like if the Hunter's Dream is actually below all of the other layers or on the top, especially with the way that the moon interacts with the Hunter's Dream specifically compared to the Nightmare of Mensis. I do have some gripes with how the celestial bodies of the moon and like this sun-like disc works in the nightmares, because this kind of disappears, and the moon in the Nightmare of Mensis is like lower than anywhere else, even arguably lower than in the Hunter's Dream when the moon presence appears. But I think they were just kind of a little bit too strapped for time at the end of development to make a lot of these more consistent, and we could always hand wave a lot of these inconsistencies away as dream logic, perhaps. So sorry, that's like not more what's the word? Fulfilling, but that's pretty much all I've got on that. All right, let's go back into the video now.
And, in the nightmare, the astral clock tower is the entrance to the nightmare fishing hamlet where the corpse of Kaz resides. When the choir tries to make contact, they actually are reaching out to something which is there, but it might not be what they think. The path they follow is ended prematurely by the descent of the red moon. It might have been a dead end all along. They followed in Willem's footsteps, but he is stagnant. He actually has mushrooms growing on his neck. Celestial mushrooms, just like the ones we can see on the milkweed rune, but that's a stagnant rune. Its Japanese name is seedbed, because that's all you become when you apply it. A seedbed for phantasms. As it turns out, a blue glow does not enlightenment make. Perhaps the choir would have had some grander fate in store if they'd have had more time to meditate, but that was not meant to be. Latriam, or the Tower of, is also an institution of learning which has a high elevation. It also did the Brain of Mensis thing before Bloodborne did. But then so did Shadow Tower Abyss. Anyways, in Latria we see another deranged pursuit of knowledge, but I think an important point of separation from it and the Healing Church is the unique quirk which Demon Souls has in the idea of evil, the ability of the soul to shape the world, and how its physical presence is informed by and informs the minds of men. Those who exercise reason are granted knowledge, those who pray are granted revelations, because miracles and magic are actually the same thing. The Beast Talisman's item description reads, an old wooden amulet resembling the old one. It can utilize both miracles and spells. The symbol of God was nothing more than the image of the old one. The existence of this talisman seems to suggest that the catalyst for sorcery's talismans for miracles rule only exists because people believe it has to. Because they are deluded from seeing what the world really is. Rather than either one being in communion with a higher force, it might just be that the forces here, the church and the wizards, are manifesting their beliefs like the idea of evil from Berserk. So, if humanity chooses kindness, then kindness will be manifested in the world. But if they choose evil, evil will manifest, to punish mankind if they stray away from the proper path. This read of the game is additionally supported by some item descriptions and the character tendency system. The most important thing about it for this video, however, is that this is what I think the reality of Demon Souls is, and I think knowledge goes deviant here because scholars do not understand the damage which their acts leave on the world and the evil they manifest in their blind pursuit of greater knowledge for its own sake. Latria is described as a learned land. Our soul art mentor, Freyk, is found in Latria, as is Spice. Every main area of Demon's Souls has one main lootable found within it, and Latria's is Spice, which we use to recover mana, which we use to cast magics and miracles. The phosphorescent pole is found here, as are other items which have an attunement or affinity for magic, like the Ring of Magical Sharpness, the Venerable Sage's outfit, the Wizard outfit, the Silver Catalyst, and the Silver Coronet. The Silver Catalyst and Coronet both mention being bestowed to magicians of the distinguished Jormidar school of magic, and that's the royal family which governed Latria. At least if the throne room being the throne room of Jormidar is anything to go by. The lore of Latria, the item drops, and environmental design all clearly highlight how this place was the magic place of this world. But when we get there, things are in shambles. An old man has taken over and has been fabricating his own demons. He
fabricating.
Deposed the old queen and has replaced her with a false idol. I like that scenario quite a bit. Before reaching the cathedral where she resides, we see an Iron Maiden ballista in her likeness which destroys those who come to her looking for salvation, and then the idol itself is a malicious demon. But the desperate prisoners pray to her anyways. They are in a cathedral praying to a literal false idol. The prisoners themselves are mostly mindless husks who...
Isn't her name different in Japanese? I don't have like a super good resource for Demon Souls to like look up that's super handy. Or maybe it is the same. Anyway, Adlai was asking, didn't humans succeed in becoming great ones with Ram? That's arguable. It seems like it could have been an accident. That is sort of the implication from Mikolash saying, cost like you did with the vacuous spider, grant us eyes, grant us eyes. But Ram is also called vacuous in her title plate, and that kind of implies that she has no mind. She's like blank-minded. So even if Ram is a great one, she doesn't exactly seem to be the most desirable great one to become. So, right. Bluepoint did the false idol so dirty in the remake? I don't know. I mean, I thought that was probably one of the better designs of the remake. But to be fair, I haven't really played the original to see how close, or like to see how much it matches the vibe or deviates therefrom. So, was Ram strong enough to hold the seal? It depends on what you think the seal is to begin with. At the very least, she was obscuring the rituals that were going on in Yahar'gul. Whether or not that was on purpose or incidental, we don't really know. But it does seem as though the School of Mensis was taking advantage of the fact that Ram is concealing the rituals to continue conducting them without being impeded by watchful eyes, perhaps. So we don't necessarily know if Ram was actually holding a seal. Okay, that's pretty much good enough, like, for Fool's Idol. Well, oh, maybe we should, like, move the, apostrophe so the idol for fools, I guess. And thank you, Levo, appreciate that. Where did you find that so quickly? Because it probably take me a couple minutes. Did you just go to like the wiki, or is there like a Reddit page or something on it? But appreciate it nonetheless.
Who drop a very poor number of souls, just like the depraved ones in the Valley of Defilement. And like them, I think the idea is to showcase how this place is set up to siphon the souls out of the prisoners, to make them suffer the loss of mental clarity. The difference between Latria and the Valley on this front might be seen in another item drop. The depraved ones drop Faint Stone, which is used to upgrade holy weapons. The prisoners drop Moonlight Stone, which is used to upgrade magic weapons. Of course, we know that the power manifested by faith is the same as the power manifested by reason. Still, I think it's noteworthy that the prisoners cling to the Moonlight Stones. They might hold on to them in an attempt to hold on to their senses. The Wardens of Latria are Mind Flayers, an old-school D&D enemy which eats the brains of sentient creatures. Did the Moonlight Stones give the prisoners any reprieve from the Mind Flayers' tortures? Speaking of torture, so you might not know this about me, because I rarely ever bring it up.
Yeah, looking at Latria in the OG, it is just so much darker. That would add a lot more mental pressure to it as well. So, as I says, Latria was scary to them. I didn't quite get that much of a vibe from it in the remake, although I did like it quite a bit. I've always been a pretty big fan of like the idea of mind flayers and whatnot. So, yeah. Yay, torture. Okay. It's still the scariest place for you in that game. For me, a lot of like the fear factor gets diminished if I kind of know what's around the next corner. So as Jolkin, Rolkin, Tolkien would say, the fear of the unknown is like the greatest fear of all.
But I love the Moongrass healing system. Just, give you a minute to absorb that. And in the first level of Latria, you cannot natively find any Moongrass healing items. In my video on the evolution of From Software's healing items, I talked about how this decision makes a big impact on the direction of the atmosphere and tension in Latria, because there's no point where your resources are not depleting. And because the first level is so big, you can get really deep into the place, and if you don't know when it ends, the extended tension cycle can really work you into a frenzy. I love the absence of grass in Latria 3.1 for that. But another reason I love it, a more relevant to this video reason, is that thematically I think there's something to be said about there not being any moonlight in this place.
So I think these are like a lot of really interesting observations with relation to the item drops for each area. And these are things that I didn't pick up on like my 2 playthroughs of Demon Souls. And maybe I also didn't pick up on the lack of grass here just because it's pretty easy to get them in the first 2 stages. So this kind of observation might become more noticeable if you come to 3.1 first from all of the Arkstones and whatnot.
Place because Enlightenment has slipped out of the fingers of the people of Latria. I wouldn't be doing my job correctly if I didn't note that the madness of the old monk isn't exclusive to the old monk, or that it might not have originated with him. It might actually be that he was just the one to finally take the fundamentally corrupt premise of the place to its logical, horrifying conclusion. If you're already obsessed with the soul arts and the manipulation of souls, is it such a surprise that a secret sect, the Soul Society, would emerge within your ranks who devote themselves to absorbing more and more souls? And why would that desire not just escalate? What is keeping the experimentations of the souls from going wild? And even though someone who went too far was exiled by the Queen, why wouldn't he just return and continue on with his mission? An idea or mission is birthed. Systems for achieving it are implemented. The consequences don't align with the intentions, the consequences are ignored, and the process is escalated. And like the spreading of the beast plague in Yharnam, you can see how the steps that take a learned land into an institution of insanity might actually be quite natural.
Nobit said something bleach, so at least I'm not the only one who had that thought cross their mind with the mentioning of the Soul Society. Okay. Paisan might be too Elden Ring brain to enjoy Demon Souls, unfortunately. I mean, it is a very, very different vibe, and in many ways, like, these games are almost incomparable, because Demon Souls, more so than all of the other FromSoft games, might be the most on the rails, whereas Elden Ring barely has rails to begin with. What are you doing? Anyway, my dog distracted me. Yeah, so not only that, Demon Souls is a lot slower and whatnot. I actually like the pace of Demon Souls combat. It's just a little bit shallow, I think, once you get used to the combat of the other games. So I don't entirely blame you there. Clearly, treats are needed, maybe. Although that we tend not to do that so late at night for the old girl. Or even like the little boy, to be honest. So there's something else I wanted to mention. I can't see anything. The drops and the moonlight. So maybe I'll get back to that later, because there is something interesting going on with like the moonlight grass, where like the older it gets, the more potent it becomes, and that might have something to do with this. Oh, right. So I kind of remembered now. So, I definitely did not pick up on the whole Bleach Soul Society Hueco Mundo arc of the Tower of Latria, which is perfectly fine, but now I am really curious what the Demon Souls world would have looked like while they were beginning to understand soul magic technology and like experiment with it more, because I'm assuming soul arts, well, no, they didn't really appear until the demons did, but when did the Tower of Latria really begin studying souls? Like, how long has this been going on? Anyway, that's like not too important, but I am really curious at like how such a secret society formed, and like what the people, the denizens of the world of Demon Souls were like thinking about interacting with these soul arts and whatnot. And then obviously, as Acer's been saying, with soul arts not being entirely distinguishable from miracles, it's kind of funny to see how that interacts with like the whole pious sect of the believers, or whatever they're called. I don't remember what they were. Yeah, Astynax brings up the point that Demon Souls combat in a lot of ways is more deliberate. You have long wind-ups and the hits are very weighty. And that's something that doesn't bother me too much, because it feels like a lot more systemic and deliberate, as you say, than when a game is just like slow but doesn't play very well. You'll probably end up playing it for the history lesson, if nothing else. My recommendation is, if you go from Elden Ring, to maybe go to Dark Souls 1 first, because that's kind of the easiest transition from Elden Ring to DS1 into either Demon Souls or Dark Souls 2. Or if you're really brave, you could go from Elden Ring to Dark Souls 2, because that game is the slowest, and then Demon Souls perhaps, or like Dark Souls 1. But I honestly don't really think there's much of a difference going from Dark Souls 1 to Demon Souls than going from Dark Souls to Dark Souls 2, surprisingly enough. True Connoisseur said, wait, are you saying Dark Souls or Demon Souls? Das or Des? The combat didn't work for you either? Too sluggish for you to enjoy the rhythm? Anyway, let's go back into the video.
If you're looking into the soul arts for a reason, you might start asking questions when the hybrid monstrosities crop up. But if you're looking into the soul arts for its own sake, nothing is beyond your purview. The Healing Church and Latria are two examples of moon-affiliated scholars gone astray. Let's go for the trifecta. If you cut off Seath's tail, it will drop the Moonlight Greatsword. Its item description reads, "This sword, one of the rare
I like high-res icon was too hard to find. Oh man, I'm gonna actually message him now while I'm thinking about it. So that way, if he needs this stuff in the future, because this video came out like last week or something like that, or 10 days ago, something around there. Give me 1 second. if you need high-res icons, this site has all the text for JP, EN, and CN, and all that stuff. Okay. Because I imagine I might forget about this later on.
Dragon weapons came from the tale of Seath the Scaleless, the pale white dragon who betrayed his own. Seath is the grandfather of sorcery, and this sword is imbued with his magic, which shall be unleashed as a wave of moonlight. Right there, sorcery and moonlight are connected, but it goes even deeper. Seath's area contains the Duke's archive, and it's a massive library and place of research and experimentation, just like the research hall of the Healing Church, complete with both settings having moving stairs, high elevation, and cells with patients. They look the same and function the same because they are exploring the same idea. Seath delved deep into research for immortality, and while he did manage to obtain it, the pursuit caused him to lose his mind. The same story can be seen when you look at Big Hat Logan. He's connected to the moon and Enlightenment because he's also a studying sorcerer, and he's actually in opposition to the prevailing order of Gwyn because he creates sorceries that directly compete with Gwyn's miracles. There's also his scimitar. I admit that it's the weakest connection, but Logan's is a crescent-shaped weapon. He also has talismans and such, and his story sees him pry into the secrets of Seath's sorceries and try to ascend. He believes the secret to ascension is to become a dragon, and in the end, he goes mad just like Seath did. And we can see this story yet again in Dark Souls 3 with Oseros. His soul can be transposed to create the moonlight in Dark Souls 3, and there, its item description reads, Legendary dragon weapon associated with Seath the Pale Drake. Charge strong attack to its limit to unleash moonlight wave. Oseros, the consumed king, was infatuated with the search for moonlight, but in the end, it never revealed itself to him. Once again, the search for the moonlight, for enlightenment and knowledge, leads someone to stagnation. The thing about enlightenment is that it's fundamentally about rejecting the premise of the world, but the motivations of those who go mad in the pursuit of it in these games is always confined to a perspective which is contained within the world rather than beyond it. You cannot truly let go if you are this invested in the process. That investment is a feature of a material and desire-rich life.
Yeah, so I would have worded that a bit differently. Like, he does say what I'm about to say, so I'm not like trying to say that he doesn't say it this way, but just to kind of reiterate what he's saying, because characters like Seath were trying to actively attain enlightenment rather than letting go of their attachments, they failed to actually become enlightened. And that's kind of like one of the drawbacks of moonlight. It could represent like false sunlight to some extent. And so like a lot of these comparisons, like Buddhism and the whole path to enlightenment, could be accurate for certain situations, but we don't necessarily know if it's supposed to map onto the cosmology of Dark Souls 1-to-1, and there could be broader contexts to consider with, moonlight essentially just being a reflection of sunlight. So there's the whole argument of like, if the moon represents enlightenment, what does that actually state about the nature of enlightenment itself if it comes from another source entirely, as far as like the brilliance of it is concerned? So with that being said, because Seath was so attached to life, he couldn't actually attain immortality, because that is the antithesis of being everlasting in the Dark Souls world. And so it comes up all the time when you look at the Path of the Dragon devotees, and as Acer's been talking about, like the meditations and whatnot being the path to attain enlightenment. You have the Ancient Dragon followers in Dark Souls in the Archdragon Peak in their meditative poses. The Stone Dragon in Ash Lake is called the Zazen Ryu in its internal file names, which is essentially like Zazen dragon, and Zazen is literally like sitting Zen, so Zen Buddhism, so you're like sitting down to meditate essentially. So it's been a theme from the very beginning of the games, although it really sucks that you really only get that if for whatever reason you can even decipher that stupid Zazen dragon is sitting in such a way, or if you have access to the internal files. And I do think that is a pretty big flaw with the games, where you need to get so much extraneous information about the games from beyond them that it's a little bit unforgivable. Hey Mildly, welcome on into the stream again, and thanks for the $2. I appreciate that. When was the goal met? You gotta see. So it happened pretty early on in the stream, maybe within like the first 20 minutes. So Dr. Fake Love, whom I know pretty well, popped into stream and then double dared me to fight some guy who I don't know, essentially. So he donoed the remaining 13. Yeah, it was definitely within the first hour. So let me try to catch up with you guys, because you're popping off with the DS2 hatred. Yeah, Ocelot kind of exists, but it might have been censored, so there can still be an argument made that Osiris was mad, but there's still like the baby cry throughout the fight. I think somebody had just brought that up. He did exist because he's mentioned. I don't know if it works quite that way. But in the fight, you thought he was delirious and imagining the baby. So no, there are screams that accompany some of Osiris's attacks, but I believe they're limited to phase 2 when after he smashes it. Or maybe no, maybe it's the opposite, that it's in phase 1. Oh, and I think, is it when the baby screams he does like the crystal breath? I think that might be a thing. It's been a while since I've had to play that fight. But I remember spending an inordinate amount of time trying to get curse deathed by Osiris for the footage of like crystal breath, curse death. And it's virtually impossible to naturally get cursed to death in that fight. I pretty much took off all of my gear and was fishing to get hit by the attack, which curses me. And it took me like an hour or two to get like a couple decent clips of it. He's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. He's cuckoo for Crystal Puffs. Crystal magic, soul magic. It's possible Osiris used Ocelot as a medium to transform his body, and the goat made him hallucinate him. No text to back that up, but you still think it's worth speculating. If it weren't for the cries, I might be able to entertain that a bit more. But okay, let's go back into the video.
So perhaps there never was a chance for Seath. Immortality is an aberration to the natural flow of the world. Life is meant to end, an unending life is a stagnant life. FromSoft elaborated on that idea in Sekiro, but for meditation, the mind, and enlightenment, look no further than the Senpu monks. The monks of Senpu Temple abandoned the teachings of the Buddha. The twisting of their philosophies is seen in their martial arts, which Wolf can learn in order to acquire more money and material. And just like you might expect for a branch of learning that goes deviant, you can see that the monks of Senpu have become stagnant and decayed. Renala of the Full Moon rules over the magic/intellect faction of Elden Ring, but when she lost her husband, she also lost her will to go on.
So I do like that observation that the Senpo monks grab more money from enemies. That's something I didn't pick up on, and it's kind of really funny to me in its own sense.
All she does now is rebirth the Culvers around her and cradle the rune which Radahn left behind for her. The moon-tuned scholars often go stagnant because they cannot give what enlightenment asks. An illumination on the nature of the world doesn't go down well with those who are invested in an incorrect way of looking at it. I don't think it's the truth which renders them insane, rather it's their inability to correlate the truth with their sense of themselves in the world they think they live in. The contradiction in perception versus reality is too great for them to bear, and so they snap. I discussed earlier, with Goldmask, How truth is perhaps best approached ex nihilo. Abandon your attachment to what you think you know before starting your journey.
And yeah, so this is kind of the point that I was going to make, worded slightly differently. So I think the critical flaw for characters like Seath and Logan especially is that, and even Willem even more explicitly, is that they all essentially want to hold on to their ego while they attain enlightenment. But the whole purpose of enlightenment is letting go of the ego. And then Mildly, thank you so much for that last $11. So you're trying to take the wind back from Dr. Fake Glove Snails to get me to that 100 mark. You watched that part of the stream? Here's some extra for playing to the end? Okay, maybe. No need for getting every single collectible or too much time setting up the AC. Just get in there and do the job, 61. We'll see. I mean, I'm going to give it my best. If I end up for whatever reason hating it, I don't want to necessarily commit myself that far, but I definitely appreciate it. And I imagine that I'll probably make it to the end, but I don't want to, write a check that my butt can't cash, I guess. Grinding S ranks could worsen the experience. So that's all I'm going to do because of the way that I play. Paisan's going to play AC6-2 as well. Cool. Now you feel committed to watch the whole gameplay. Okay. But yeah, thank you so much for the continued generosity, my man. Yeah, I know 621 is the character. Or at least maybe I didn't actually know that, but context made it obvious. Thank you. So, all right, Ask Next, you have a good night, and thanks for dropping by as always. Catch you on the next one. Is the Writhing Ruin in DS2 just the spider, or is it implied to be Seath's essence somehow preserved as the Pale Drake's soul? The latter, and I think that becomes more explicit when you go into New Game Plus or you use a bonfire aesthetic, because it calls it like the Pale Drake's soul or something along those lines. Don't let the scarlet rot bite. All right, Mildly, good luck with those bananas and all the other skating stuff that you've been working on. Take care. There might be AC6 story spoilers in this video, though you don't know how impactful they are without context. He brought it up a little bit, but to be fair, I tend to forget a lot of details more so when I'm streaming. So I know a tiny little bit about the corral and stuff. So hopefully I'll live regardless. I know we got the buffering thing on a downloaded video. Zoink Scoob. Anyway, in other news, I like his use of the Ghost Flame Torch. I didn't know you could turn it off. Well achieved. At first I thought that was the Celebrant skull, but nope, it's a little bit different. Seath was too angry to die. He's too angry to live. When good ideas go bad. Let's try backing it up and forward. Nope. YouTube hates me. And the worst thing is if I just refresh the page, it's going to think I want to watch the actual video. I should have paid more attention to the timer when I clicked this. Why? It hates you guys because you can't see squad either. Well, to be fair, if you're looking at my screen, it just has, the same stuff going on. But if my stream itself is dying on you guys, there's nothing going on between me and YouTube as far as the stream stuff goes. It's just other reasons. I don't know, man. This is the worst. We had a really good stretch going on there for a while, though. You hate that the Sentinel Torch basically only reveals one boss when there's so many invisible things in Elden Ring? Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I wish there was more. I wanted to use the torch more than I did. right, so now we're back on the video. Hopefully this works. Here we go.
And then, when the truth is revealed to you, you won't be in conflict with it, and in fact, it will fit comfortably within your mind. On that, let's discuss another important Buddhist teaching, the moon in a dewdrop. The moon in a dewdrop is a teaching which the master Dogen would use to describe meditation. He explained that just as the entire...
And Dugan was also the name of a character in Sekiro, but obviously he might have been inspired by like the actual Dr. Dogen. Well, you know, doctor wasn't exactly the same thing back then, but he existed in the capacity of a doctor in Sekiro. I don't remember if the guy we meet in the underside of Ashina Castle is called Dogen, or if he like was the person that fake doctor guy was like in correspondence with, or from whom he pretended to have like learned medicine. But I just basically remember the name coming up somewhere in the context of that game.
Our moon is reflected in a dewdrop. A complete awakening of the truth can be experienced by the individual human being. I've also heard this metaphor use a bowl of water, that just like how the entire moon, or its reflection, can be captured in a small bowl of water, enlightenment can be contained within the confines of a single human mind. The search for knowledge goes wrong not because it is beyond human comprehension, but because humans, often, reject what they see on the other side.
And right, to give a little bit more context for that, or at least to just say it in another way to hopefully make it a bit more digestible, would be that when you have that drop of dew and let's say you're outside and at night and the moon is out, you can still see the moon refracted and reflected within that dewdrop just as well as you could within a body of water like a bowl or a pond or a lake. And the moon itself isn't necessarily contained within the lake or the drop of water, but it kind of is. Like the entirety of the lake is, you know, millions of drops of water collected, but within each individual drop, you can essentially see a facsimile of the moon. So enlightenment exists beyond the individual as well as within the individual is kind of what that principle might be hinting at, depending on one's interpretation of that story.
Maybe the finger should have just pointed at enlightenment all along, eh? Because if it had, the image of the cosmos might have never been abused. Men will wear the moon to lie to other men, but there's another, more unnerving reason.
Oh, is it actually called Dojun? Okay, whoopsies.
Why knowledge and the pursuit of it can go so terribly wrong. The moon's image fits perfectly in a bowl of water, but so do many other things. The moon is symbolic for enlightenment, it is not enlightenment itself. Failing to absorb this, the scholars reach out to the cosmos in hopes for answers, and that which hears the call can be more destructive than a life of ignorance. There's more things in the cosmos than moons and truths.
Nobit says the good doctor is Dogen, his crazy disciple is Dojun/Dosaku. Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, the guy down there was crazy who had some beef with Dogen because of their different views. The NPC we meet is implied to have killed him. Okay, that's kind of what I thought. Thank you for the mostly confirmation there. Before you beckon, be ware with your Kagare.
It would take a blind faith that whatever comes from the cosmos is desirable, for the sects and scholars here to look.
Sorry, I forgot because I had reloaded the page that the captions went away. I'm not gonna back up. That's
at
dangerous.
The outer beings they come into contact with and see them as anything other than monsters. But when you've destroyed the world looking for answers, when something steps out from beyond to greet you, do you really have a choice to not believe? What would that do to you? Your entire society is devoted to a task which seals your own fate. When you look at the bringer of destruction, could you understand that his presence was your own fault?
So, in the words of the lecture hall note, hunt the great ones. Hunt the great ones. You don't need to understand nothing. You just gotta get behind the Murgo wet nurse and smack that booty with your weapon.
Those who meet the outer beings come to have their civilizations swallowed by the earth, and the monstrous presence which brought about their destruction lingers in the dark. In the Artorias of the Abyss DLC, we go to Ulasil and see what men wrought upon themselves when they pried too deep into forbidden knowledge.
Oh yeah, and I don't remember if I ever mentioned this like on my playthrough of Elden Ring, although I think I may have brought it up briefly, but only left it as a brief comment because it's not all of that actionable. But I do think it's funny that we have multiple DLCs or even areas in the FromSoft games where people's heads get messed with by because of supernatural forces that are like kind of intrinsic to the game. So like the horn scent mess with like spirits essentially, and they get these extra horns and they get kind of like enlarged heads because of it, sort of, but not exactly. And then the exact same thing is going on in Ulasil, where people's humanity starts raging and then their heads get bigger, they start growing more eyes, which of course is different, but kind of odd that it's happened twice.
The item description for most of the Ulasil sorceries, the ones we find in the actual DLC at least, reads, Abyss sorcery discovered by an Ulasil sorcerer on the brink of madness. And this pursuit of knowledge was what compelled the Ulasilians to awaken Manus, torture him, and learn from him all they could. But as repressed humanity does, it went wild within Manus and transformed him into a monster. And as Manus transformed, so did the scholars who beckoned him and pried from him the dark knowledge. They share in his monster's new form, writhing shadows, tree-like, and with red eyes dotted around. A deviant pursuit of knowledge, characterized by a demonic hunger for the humanity of others, fits in well with what we've been discussing. A hunger is born, and as it is fed, it grows greater and greater, until a visitor from beyond arrives to inflict his will upon the land. If you are devoted enough to your mission, you might convince yourself that that thing which has come knocking at the door has come to answer your prayers, but just as easily, it might have been a chance encounter.
I just kind of love how chaotic Ulasil feels as you continue to literally descend in a spiral down into it, up until the Chasm of the Abyss, which is kind of like the peak of Dark Souls 1 to me when you get to that point.
And its intentions can be completely devoid of compassion for you. The awakening of Manus, monster mode, spawned the Abyss which destroyed Ulasil. And this story has been revisited often. In Elden Ring, deep beneath the Lands Between, we can find the remains of the eternal city of Nokron. The Knight Maiden Twin Crowns item description reads, Twin crowns worn by the Knight Maidens of the Eternal City indicates the highest clerical rank and hides the eyes with silk. Long ago, the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground. Now they live under a false night sky in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of the stars and their Lord of Night. What can a civilization learn from glimpsing a false sky? The false sky was summoned by an invader from beyond. After the Greater Will banished the city to the underworld, despair took over. In Kalit we can find a Celian sorcery called Eternal Darkness, and its item description reads, Forbidden sorcery of Celia, town of sorcery, creates a space of darkness that draws in sorceries and incantations. This sorcery can be cast while in motion. Originally a lost sorcery of the Eternal City, the despair that brought about its ruin made manifest. The effect of this sorcery is to absorb other spells that are cast in combat, and it does so by summoning a black hole. Astel's remembrance refers to him as a falling star of ill omen. Was he perhaps pulled down to the Eternal City by the gravity of the void which their despair birthed.
You know, I kind of forgot that Acer was asking about this like a couple months back, and I'd given him my take on it, and so I was just kind of surprised that it came out this way. I don't know why, but it could completely slipped my mind, because this reading is pretty unintuitive, I think, for many people because of the way the English is phrased, and many people also will conflate the arrival of Estelle and stealing the Nox sky with the ire of the greater will banishing them underground. But obviously, because this is kind of my reading on things that I gave Acer, I am more inclined to believe with this one that the Nox were already in a state of despair, which is a little bit clearer, but it's still compatible with the English reading. And then that's when Estelle came to take away their false sky. Now, I don't necessarily know if the false sky was the product of Estelle. I would kind of disagree with that, because he needed to steal it, which would imply that it was already there to steal, or whether or not what's it called? Not black hole. Eternal darkness spawned the false night sky would also be something that I probably wouldn't fully agree with, but anyway. Right. Hilko said, you just realized that maybe the stone ball caterpillars might be like the inversion of how Estelle's hang from the ceiling with energy balls? Oh, that'd be kind of an interesting idea. Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. You wonder how good that spell is actually gets most of the magic enemies in Elden Ring? It would be really funny if you could eat Metter's space lasers with your own black hole. I honestly haven't messed around with the int builds too much, but it would be tempting to see how effective Eternal Darkness is when we have no memory to open the page. Cool. Gotta refresh everything again, and then go back to live chat. So what else is going to say? Oh yeah. So I did really like in Dark Souls 3, this isn't too important, that the Londorian swordswomen, aka Yuria and Lillian and Sister Frida, would rely on profound stillness, so that way they could use their sword arts to dispatch their enemies. So they became badass swordsmen who disabled the magic of others and just relied on their brute strength to get rid of their foes. That's such a cold lore element to them that I just absolutely love. Yes, so my opinion, Mike, is that it is indeed the false night sky that Estelle stole. And for what it's worth, when you do encounter like the Lake of Rot, Estelle, he does kind of have a false night sky around him, unlike the one in the Yellow Annex Tunnel. So, okay, let's go back into the video now.
Chance encounters with the beyond are often sought to accelerate the process of learning, but when the outer beings come into contact with humanity, it is often to the latter's detriment. When Wolf rings the demon bell, he attracts the presence of a spirit which increases the difficulty of the game, but also improves item drops. The bell is found in Senpu Temple. Did the monks have a fleeting encounter with this demon and turn from the way of the Buddha, or was this demon born from their indulgence of the material world?
The funny thing is, the first time I played Sekiro, I rang the bell, had no idea what it was about, and it took me a while to realize like what its effect was. Actually, I think I probably read about it on like Reddit or something by accident, and I was like, oh, and then I like took it off, but it wasn't like that bad. Maybe I should do like a demon bell run sometime. I haven't done like a Sekiro challenge run, sort of, but I don't know. Sekiro is like a really fun action game, but it's not one that I can like return to super frequently. It's more fun if I forget as much as I can to remember everything.
Formless Erden lingers as a presence within blood.
Ha! See, the hard R of Erden lingers in the auto captions.
And is seemingly concentrated in the chapel which bears his name. Over the course of Bloodborne's story, assuming the player rescued Ariana, her features will become paler and paler, reflecting the Cainhurst legacy within her being brought to the outside. Erden has latched onto her, and in the end of the game, she will birth a celestial child from this communion. Bergenworth massacred the fishing hamlet to get Cos, and the atrocity they committed spawned a curse which follows and torments every hunter. In the Hunter's Nightmare, we can find the research hall where the Healing Church did its experiments. The patients talk about hearing the sound of water. The deep sea runes item description reads, "Great volumes of water serve as a bulwark guarding sleep and an augur of the eldritch truth. Overcome this hindrance and seek what is yours."
So Adlai says you never saw her pale. Yeah, so it's a lot more obvious if you go to like the Datamined character model pages, where not only does Ariana become more pallid as the game progresses, she actually gets like visibly pregnant essentially, and it's really hard to tell if you're just like pulling out your monocular and examining her in the chapel because she's like sitting down always, but they did actually go through the trouble of making her look that way. And if memory serves me correctly, she dies after you beat the One Reborn. Or no, she doesn't die, sorry. She that's when she might birth her child as soon as you beat the One Reborn. So if you want to see her in the pallid state, you need to do it after you defeat Rom, but before killing the One Reborn. Or it might be killing Mikolash. It's one of those two are like the trigger points. It's either the One Reborn, but certainly before Mikolash. I think I noticed that, or pointed it out when I did like one of my last Bloodborne streams ages ago, which of course is archived on the live section of the channel.
Beyond the waters which the patients are in tune with is the moon in the nightmare fishing hamlet, but it's cursed, and so there's no enlightenment here. Is that why those who are tuned to the sound of this water become living failures? Our encounter with Rom brings us closer to seeing the truth of the world, but it also drops the red moon and ushers in the destruction of Yarn. The moon runes item description reads, "A secret symbol left by Carol, runesmith of Bergenworth, a transcription of moon as spoken by the greater ones inhabit."
So Adla, you just got kicked out of the stream? Okay, so something odd had happened a moment ago. You might have seen like the image from the stream itself go black. So something just happened where like I had to like it just like manually refreshed itself without me doing anything. So there might be something going on with YouTube. I have no idea what this is, but sometimes this happens to me like maybe once or twice a stream.
The nightmare. Gain more blood echoes. The great ones that inhabit the nightmare are sympathetic in spirit and often answer when called upon. But sympathetic in spirit is not meant as them being deeply emotionally invested or compassionate or anything like that. The Japanese is trying to convey that they are sensitive to outside stimuli.
Yes.
If you've ever wondered why the Great Ones don't all act compassionate in the light of this description, there you go. Kos and Rom seem to have had kindness in their hearts.
And this, it's really awkward talking about this because it's so damn pedantic to the point where it's annoying and it feels like really minor stuff that you're making like a mountain out of a molehill. But as far as like the moon rune is concerned, it says that Nightmare Great Ones or the Nightmare Great One responds to the voices of those who cry out. And when you look at like the note, one of the notes in Yahar Gul, which says that the nightmare is with the nightmare ritual is with the newborn. Find the infant, silence its crying voice, ties back into that. So because the baby is crying and it's a crying voice, that crying voice is what like the Nightmare Great One or Great Ones are responding to because they're sympathetic in spirit, with sympathy, as Acer just pointed out, being meant in the sense of responsive toward those crying voices. So if y'all have ever heard a baby cry, it is certainly enough to inspire action to try to alleviate what's going on. And then there's something else I wanted to say. Let me think. Oh, right. The whole Red Moon stuff. I'm not sure where Acer is coming across with this, because he can make it inadvertently sound as though once you defeat Rom, then the Red Moon goes crazy and pretty much like destroys Yharnam. But I would argue the opposite case, that the Red Moon is actually always present within Yharnam on our night of the hunt, and it's merely Rom concealing its existence. And Yharnam is kind of already gone to crap even as soon as we wake up, which is why so many of the townsfolk have transformed before we even step foot outside of Yosefka's clinic. Moon presence really just hates auditory stimulus. And to be fair, like, the voices of the Great Ones travel in water, and Carol runes are essentially the sounds and the voices of the Great Ones. So it kind of all comes full circle as far as the cosmology of the game is concerned, which is why I really love the world building present within Bloodborne.
Kos brought abundance to the fishing hamlet. Rom keeps...
Oh yeah, and so to talk a bit more about that crying voice thing, because I don't think I presented it as tangibly to the game as we could, this gets reinforced through other things, like as soon as the Red Moon gets revealed, you hear Murgo crying as the moon comes like crushing down on the hunter. But if you actually have 60 insight before that point in the game, you'll be able to hear Murgo's crying voice from the get-go, which implies that the nightmare rituals are ongoing as soon as you wake up in Yosefka's clinic. And there's the note in Bergenworth, which is a lot clearer in the Japanese, that true enlightenment need not be shared with just anyone. And so, as far as enlightenment is concerned, that's like the insightful truth. So if you have enough insight, you'll be able to begin to perceive the rituals going on. And then, of course, there is that one lady that's in, what's it called? Charnel Lane? Hemwick. That's in Hemwick that says, like, oh, like this voice, I hear it, like, stop this auspicious voice. I think the English might make it sound a little bit different. Oh, maybe she says like graveyard murmurs or something like that. But the Japanese is like, what is this voice? Or something like that. What is this ominous voice? And so that could hint that that lady might actually be hearing Murgo crying, amongst other things. Or she could just be mad, like it is presented in the English. It's ambiguous, which is one of the fun things about deciphering the lore of a game like this. A lot of people think that Rom is blocking and reducing the Red Moon energy, so killing her makes everything go nuclear. I definitely understand that. However, I would argue that it's a steady state of progression as the night goes on, because all of the townsfolk that you can talk to can stop responding to you before the Red Moon is revealed, provided you go out of your way to kill enough bosses to progress time. So if you go to Central Yharnam, you have all of the people kind of talking to you normally if you don't kill too many bosses. But if you go through like the Nightmare Frontier, kill Amygdala, go to Canehurst and whatnot, and then go back to Central Yharnam before defeating Rom, then all of the people will still be super crazy and be despondent as well. So time progresses and the Red Moon is there. It's just coinciding, or a coincidence, that once you kill Rom, people kind of stop responding because time has progressed, essentially, in my eyes. NoBit asks, is Murgo the only exception to the rule that all Great Ones lose their children, or is Murgo a regular baby that got elevated? So it is arguable that Murgo was born as a Great One, but Murgo is kind of already dead in a sense because it is a Great One. So a little bit of both. And I kind of hinted at this yesterday on stream. You weren't here, obviously, or if you were, you were lurking. But there is the possibility that the reason the Great Ones lose their children is because a Great One's consciousness gets imparted into their child, and then that's how they ascend. But that's kind of really out of left field if you don't have the context for it. And that certainly isn't true. That's just kind of some speculation as to a potential functioning of the world of Bloodborne. And that might tie into why Yharnam cries over like what's going on with Murgo, but there might also be more of a story there. Because Yarnum herself could be reacting to Murgo's crying voice, much like the moon presence or Murgo's wet nurse, and that they just like want the baby to shut up. But maybe not really. It might call into their like maternal or paternal instincts, perhaps. Yarhagul just goes bad because the ritual hits a critical point and not because the secret is broken. It could be a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So one question that I do have is, since Yarhagul is kind of the hidden village at the beginning of the game, is if all of the stuff that we find there after the Red Moon gets revealed, if all that was actually how it was supposed to look, but the hunter just lacked the insight to perceive reality, or they were trying to not perceive what was really there and like deluding themselves. But I do think that doesn't work entirely with the weird like skeleton dudes that act as like sound bells. If you like walk by them, they ring. So they could be like arcane amplifiers for all I know. So I do tend to think that there's probably multiple elements going on. All right, so here we go.
In their hearts. Kas brought abundance to the fishing hamlet. Ram keeps the red moon from descending. But this isn't universal.
And I would disagree with that because of all of like the Bergenworth notes and whatnot. The red moon is there. It just not visible to people in Yarnum. And Miyazaki talks about that in his Drained of Blood interview, that the Yarhagul note about behold a pale blood sky was supposed to hint at that, because the pale blood sky is the sky with the red moon, and that's there at the beginning of the game. If you go to Yarhagul super early when it's still like dusk, and then it's even there when you're at like full nighttime, moon high in the sky, all white. And then it's even there when the red moon is revealed. So the note is trying to tell us that it's correct and that the red moon is there. We just lack the means to perceive it at that point in time.
Elden, the wet.
And of course, Miyazaki does say that that didn't come off super well on his part.
Nurse and the moon presence are not forces you should want to reach out to. Not when you consider the effect which reaching out to them has had. In Bergenworth, we can find a note that reads, "The spider hides all manner of rituals certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared." A more accurate translation would go, "True enlightenment must not be shared, because those who glance the red moon hanging low go mad."
I would disagree with that pretty strongly. Let me go ahead and pull up my spreadsheet because I have all of this stuff already done. True enlightenment. Okay. So I won't just rely on my translation, since I do have a backup that I can point to, just so that way we have more points of context than just myself. So the official localization is, "The spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared." Mine is, "The spider hides all rituals, they must not be exposed. The insightful truth is something not everyone needs to understand." So this is kind of implying that there's rituals, but it has nothing to really do with keeping everyone from enlightenment. They're just saying that, hey, we're doing some bad crap. We don't need everybody looking into our business, is the vibe that I get from this. And so to compare my notes with Aruki's, the reason why I have insightful with an asterisk here is to imply that, literally speaking, the word Kamo Teki does mean like enlightening truth. That is indeed correct and accurate, but Kamo is also the term used for the insight stat, literally. So I figure it might be more of the dev intention to tie the insight stat to this note, which is why I have that like that. So this is like technically inaccurate, but more of a localization in trying to get at the meaning there. So for Aruki Mania's translations, he's got, "The spider hides all rituals, they are not to be revealed. The enlightened truth need not be understood by anyone." So it's kind of a weird sentence to try to translate directly into English and keep it literal. And then Aruki's note here is that they've taken a more literal approach to the phrase enlightened truth here, but they agree with me about the use of insight for enlightenment and think that this probably should be understood as the insightful truth if insight is to be accepted for Kamo. So I don't remember if I looked at the Korean for this. Oh, I did. Okay. The spiders hiding various rituals. Don't expose them. There is no need to share true enlightenment. Huh, interesting. Okay. And I did this myself, but it's been so long since I've actually looked at Korean. My Korean is super trash. Okay. All right, Level of It, thank you once again for the gifted subs. I appreciate that so much. And letting us view your video, and you have a good night. Hopefully we'll catch you sometime soon. Alrighty, so you guys are done with that. Let's go back into the video. Do I like Mandarin by any chance? I can't say that I like it, but that's because I haven't really looked at it. So, no? Question mark? Yeah, I haven't even begun to look into Chinese other than, kanji, which is kind of a very different system. You found it that if I like Japanese and Korean, you think it'd be funny if I don't like Mandarin? To be fair, I was forced to learn Korean, so there's a little bit of a caveat there.
To reiterate, the moon is a symbol. Enlightenment is not literally in the cosmos, but failing to note the difference, scholars attune themselves to it. And when they get a response from horrifying monstrosities, their need for an answer compels them to embrace demons and their own destruction. Let's get philosophical here for a moment.
All right, true connoisseur, you have a good night as well. Okay, I understand you now, Adla.
What would you give for enlightenment? Would you sacrifice your humanity? Would you hunt the humanity of others? Utter heresy? Would you forfeit your country? Risk losing your mind? Would you do these things knowing there's a chance that what the world offers up in return might not be enlightenment at all? If you walked the path halfway through and then began having doubts, if you came to believe that your studies were leading you to destruction in the light of everything we've discussed so far, would you continue, or would you destroy the path everywhere it can lead, as well as yourself, to keep others safe?
I don't necessarily like that line of questioning because it implies a certain kind of omniscient knowledge about what the path to enlightenment should entail, which kind of implies you already know what's going on. And if you already knew what was going on, how would you hold on, let me rephrase this. If you knew you were wrong, why would you continue to go down the wrong path? And if you didn't know you were wrong, how would you know that you're going down the wrong path? So I don't really feel like this is the most fair question to ask.
A demon can wear a friendly face. How do you know you can trust it? Do you play it safe, or throw the die and let the world teeter on your certainty?
Actually, I really need to get water. I've been suffering a little bit, but apparently I'm running pretty behind on the time for tonight. So I'm going to go AFK briefly to refill me water. So be right back. The Tomb of the Giants is a pretty scary area, especially on a first playthrough. I'll just go ahead and say it so we get cursed. I do kind of remember the layout of the area, but a lot of the specifics are hard to remember. Byhander, and I think as we start to go down now, we get shot at, or if we're not being shot at right now. Okay. I thought there was a way to fall there. Shows how well I actually remember that layout. Actually, let's try to be smart for once. Wait, I don't think I have any of the prism stones. That's all of my stones are in Dark Souls 3. I think it's a little bit further to the left. Spamming the R2. We said we're going to go about this normal style. It's actually going this way. And then we slide down here and make a right. Oh, it's this one, isn't it? That we just dropped down. Okay, so I was misremembering where. So now we should be like right by the bonfire. It's like down there. Yeah. Okay, and I am back.
Cross the Rubicon and endure the fires which follow. Fires of Rubicon.
So is this the stuff that I should skip? All right. Let's go ahead and, yeah, we seek it insatiably.
So far. These horrors are endured in the belief that something awaits the perpetrators in the end which is so glorious that it will all have been worth it. Have you thought about my question? How far would you go? Myself? I don't know. If you take the first step, then the second step is just one more step.
Yeah, but I would not walk 500 miles, and I would not walk 500 more.
If you walk half the path, you've already done that much, and your tolerances will have been altered. So maybe you don't turn a city into hell in one day, you just gradually accept one more atrocity, and you justify it to yourself believing there's some higher end that's being met. Lawrence had an idea. What if instead of looking at the moon's reflection, like a bunch of nerds, they were to just experiment with the old blood? And they did. And again, and no matter how often they failed to get the results they wanted, the healing church would not change tact until Lawrence was gone and the choir and mensis had split from each other. Yharnam seems to have always had a bit of a beast problem, but after the consecration of old blood, the problem became a crisis, which then became a catastrophe. The early days of the beast hunt are characterized by Gurman and Maria. Nimble movements and fast weapons like the burial blade and the rakuyo. Later days have larger beasts, and so larger, heavier weapons are used. After Gurman disappeared into the hunter's dream, Ludwig became the leader of the hunters, and his era's weapons are things like the Ludwig's Holy Blade and the Kirkhammer. The problem facing Yharnam grew steadily worse as obstinate scholars escalated instead of re-evaluating. And as the problem grew, so did the force they needed to apply to keep a lid on it. Lawrence never changed his mind. He, or at least a Healing Church high official, can be seen in a painting in Canehurst insinuating a relationship with the royal family there. The item description for the third umbilical cord we find in the abandoned workshop reads, "A great relic, also known as the Cord of the Eye." Every infant Great One has this precursor to the umbilical cord. Every Great One loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. The third umbilical cord precipitated the encounter with a pale moon, which beckoned the hunters and conceived the hunter's dream. Used to gain insight and, so they say, eyes on the inside, although no one remembers what that truly entails. This is the cord which Lawrence got from Queen Annalise. With it, he and Gurman created the hunter's dream, and in exchange, it seems like the Moon Presence wanted a child. Having massacred one infant Great One to acquire this cord, Lawrence went on the hunt for another, but succumbed to the beasthood along the way.
And of course, we don't know if Lawrence and or Gurman did massacre a Great One to get that umbilical cord. Some believe that the workshop cord could have belonged to Mother Koss. Others think it could have come from the tombs and been related to like Queen Yharnam, but we just don't really know for certain.
Thumeru Chalice dungeon line that leads to the still pregnant Queen Yharnam first leads to the bloodletting beast. Its head has a massive scar, and a headless variant of the boss can later be found. On the altar of the Grand Cathedral we can find the skull of Lawrence, which has a scar as well. Dialogues spoken by Lawrence can be found in the Chalice dungeons, and knowing how FromSoft reuses cut concepts from the base game in the DLCs, us talking to Ludwig's decapitated head in the Hunter's Nightmare might have originally been the idea with Lawrence as the bloodletting beast. The transformation into a beast can be halted by the holy men of the church, but it cannot be averted. Instead, it just recoils much harder when it is finally activated, and the holy men become the most twisted beasts of them all. The bloodletting beast is Lawrence. I've argued this many times, and I've never been convinced otherwise. And the fate that awaits him in the Hunter's Nightmare, the game's representation of hell, is to be mindless and aflame. punishment for his transgressions. His skull and his lucidity rests under an alternate version of the cathedral he rests in, so close to recovering himself, but never given the chance to do so.
And if one wants to believe that, I certainly can't dissuade them, but I do think that leaves open some very important questions, like, then how does one reconcile the existence of quote-unquote Lawrence's skull within the Waking World Grand Cathedral, or depending on what you want to call the Waking World Grand Cathedral, let's just say the skull behind Vicar Amelia, obviously.
The pursuit of enlightenment and the communion with the moon did not play well with Lawrence, but he's only the second most horrendous beast we can encounter in the game. First place goes to Ludwig, and his relationship with the moon might shed more light on the nature of the world. Those who persist in these worlds are degraded. We rarely fight these legends at their peak. Usually all that is left is whatever lump of flesh was able to drag itself from the great fight where they earned their legendary status. The cycles which govern these worlds leech life, crush the will, and turns people into monsters.
Alright, so I guess I could elaborate a little bit more that if one believes the blood-letting beast is supposed to be Lawrence, then if we have like his actual physical skull behind Vicar Amelia, then does that mean the bloodletting beast is essentially a dream Lawrence? And then if that's the case, why should we argue that that bloodletting beast is more Lawrence than the fiery version of Lawrence elsewhere in the Hunter's Nightmare? So a lot of what can make the bloodletting beast theory work is contingent on how one even conceives the Chalice dungeons to work in the first place, because they seem to be a kind of supernatural phenomenon, or at the very least a supernatural representation of what might have been a physical place, or potentially a supernatural representation of a specific time that may or may not be analogous to present day, if that makes sense. Global Sequence doesn't think that the Chalice Dungeons exist in the same time/space as the Waking World, since we enter it from the Hunter's Dream. And to be fair, we kind of also enter the Hunter's Dream from... we enter the Waking World from the Hunter's Dream in a sense. And then Paisan says the headless bloodletting beast would also be Lawrence. Now, yes, he's not trying to argue anything different about that, but you personally don't buy that theory, and that's perfectly fine. This is one of the most contentious points in the lore that people have their own headcanons about, I guess, in a more literal sense of the word. Without Horn sees the Chalice Dungeons as creating pocket dimensions that recreate the past under certain conditions. Exactly, and I mean, I shouldn't say exactly, but that is indeed a popular theory about them as well. And that doesn't necessarily discount any of these theories, although then it would be really awkward to try to reconcile why the other beast-like form of Lawrence is so different from his physical beast form, I guess. I don't know, it's weird. I honestly hate that Lawrence is essentially just a reskinned cleric beast, and Lawrence would have been way cooler as a reskinned bloodletting beast at the very least. So anyway.
Ludwig, like Lawrence, is trapped in hell and is cursed to forever mindlessly stomp and smash on the corpses which find themselves in his arena. His head is dazed and half-dreaming, and he seems to actually be piloted by an arcane-spewing mouth which has manifested itself on his shoulders. Just like Lawrence, the great man has been reduced to a mad and a mindless beast, tormented in the nightmare. Suffering is born from attachment. Enlightenment is the path out. And after he takes enough of a beating, and the holy moonlight sword dislodges itself from his body, his sanity is reawoken.
Ah, you were at my side all along. My true mentor. My guiding moonlight.
A cursory glance at the manifestation of enlightenment, and Ludwig is cured. But why does this power not affect everyone equally? I suppose Lawrence being...
And it could also be important to mention that in the second phase of the fight, he does lose his beast tag, so he's no longer weak to the typical beast weapons or weaknesses like serrated blades and things like that.
In the Chalice dungeon precluded him from seeing the moon. But what about the others who lose their way? Dojin's experiments occur in an abandoned dungeon where the moonlight does not reach. The Sokushin Butsu monks are in a cave. Artorius doesn't see the moonlight because it's still day. Midra is trapped in his man's...
Hold on, I want to re-watch that portion because I got distracted by his pronunciation of the thing. Hold on.
And Ludwig is cured. But why does this power not affect everyone equally? I suppose Lawrence being in the Chalice dungeon precluded him from seeing the moon. But what about the others who lose their way? Dojin's experiments occur in an abandoned dungeon where the moonlight does not reach. The Sokushin Butsu monks are in a cave. Artorius doesn't see the moonlight because it's still day. Midra is trapped in his man's. King Alant is kept within the old one. Seath is blind, so he couldn't see it anyways. Likewise, Shabriri's eyes have been gouged out, and Osiros and the old monk don't have any eyes either. The Healing Church models itself on the iconography and practices which were born in Bergenworth.
Oh no, Big Hat Logan's brim also blocks the moon, doesn't it?
Chief among them was the covering of the eyes. The idea is that it wards off external stimuli and allows oneself to develop eyes on the inside. But if you're blocking out the world around you, wouldn't it stand to reason that all you have is yourself? And if the ideas and beliefs you harbor within are wrong, what does meditating on them do for you? Is it like watering a bad seed? Why is it so obviously correct to ignore the real world in front of you in favor of the imagined world within? Could the failure to return to reality be as simple as these characters just literally not being able to see the moonlight? Perhaps.
So about this, I almost feel like it's too... I don't feel like reductive is the right word, but... short-sighted isn't it either. I guess I can't even think of a word that would fit here for what I'm trying to describe, but... he might be inadvertently implying that the solution to all these enlightenment woes is actual exposure to the moonlight, which I don't think that would be what he believes. Maybe I'm wrong about that. So if I were trying to think about this from a different perspective, from his point of view, you might be able to argue that nobody would get true enlightenment or eyes on the inside because they couldn't see the moon that way, because the moon isn't necessarily inside them. If he's like putting this metaphor into a more literal framework here. So moving beyond that, I'm just trying to think of any instances where direct contact with the moon or being affiliated with the moonlight's power isn't necessarily associated with blindness or things like that. Because in Dark Souls, we have a lot of occlusion of the eyes tying into blocking fire from being too bright, so that way people can still see, like in the case of the Ringed City Knights. But then Gwendolyn also has that weird sun mask on his face, and he's like the dark sun and like kind of like the moon in a way. Could we associate Priscilla with the moon? Maybe. There's the moonlight butterfly. That's kind of its own weird thing. I don't know where I would even begin to put something like that into this framework. Willem also has his own eye covering, so he's not exactly looking at the moon, but we don't know when he started to cover his eyes and all that. Too simplistic? Maybe. Maybe that works. Eyes on the inside can't see the moon. I do know that the moonlight butterfly equals moon via Seath, but what does that say about a creature like Midir, who has like an older form of moonlight than Seath does, but still kind of fell to its own depravity, although it fell to its own depravity on behalf of the gods, so maybe that's not the most fair. What other like moonlight things can I think of? Okay, so what about the actual brain of Mensis that is strung up and like looking towards the moon? And that's arguably the most brain rotted thing within Bloodborne, and it's like so it's literally stated to have evil eyes that are like deformed essentially. But of course, like, its deformity may not have been a product of the moon specifically as much as it was like the product of Murgo's voice, which is arguable, but either way, it's still strung up looking at the moon. I do know that some people believe that the brain of Mensis could have been soaking in moonlight and storing the moonlight within its eyes and then essentially shooting it back out at other people and like projecting it. I don't necessarily buy that theory, but that might be worth consideration here.
But I think there's something more. After Ludwig has been defeated, we acquire the Guidance Rune. Its item description reads, a Carol rune discovered by the old hunter Ludwig, along with the Holy Moonlight Sword. Boosts amount of life recovered by rallying. When Ludwig closed his eyes, he saw darkness, or perhaps nothingness, and that is where he discovered the tiny beings of light. Ludwig was...
Okay, and then to build off this point, and he might get to this as well, what about Adeline or Adeline, however you want to pronounce her name, where she doesn't entirely, like, she cannot physically see the moon at all. For one, she's kind of in a nightmare, which might have its own celestial body problems as far as, like, what constitutes a moon. Second of all, she's in a, like, research tower, like, there's essentially a dungeon, and she's locked, literally strapped to a chair, locked in a room isolated from the external world in a multitude of ways, yet she kind of receives her own elusive private sort of guidance that has nothing to do with the moon, and maybe you can argue that that's not like enlightenment, but I can't imagine how fair of a description that would be if you think that form of guidance itself is not enlightened, which is a possibility, but yeah, probably a little bit unfair to ask this question without being able to get a direct response, but sometimes that's just how it is when you're interfacing with like something on a public platform. You love it when your lower tubers finish each other's sandwiches? Sandwich.
Certain that these playful dancing sprites offered guidance. They could empty Ludwig of his fears, at least in the midst of a hunt. Ludwig believed that the light he saw when he closed his eyes was a celestial guidance. But, and I've noted this before, the Guidance Rune and the Beast Rune are the same rune. There's just some tendrils missing. Which is the original? Was Ludwig being led astray by an incomplete glimpse he had of the beasthood within him?
I'm a little bit surprised that he would say that these are the same rune, and he might be tying this thematically back to how the Old One in Demon Souls represents both like faith and intelligence, like magic, sorcery, and like miracles. But as far as everything else he's talked about in relation to Bloodborne, he seemed to be quite a strong believer of beasthood, which I would assume would be relevant to the Beast Rune, more to be antithetical to the slug-like powers, which I would associate with like phantasms, and what I would believe would be described within the Guidance Rune, because the guidance described here is not that dissimilar to the guidance described for Adeline, which goes on to create the Milkweed Rune, the Seedbed Rune, and their relation to phantasms with like the Kos parasite and whatnot. The Facehugger Rune? Okay, at least I'm not the only one to see it that way, yeah. Ziona says, it all circles back to Bloodborne being the same universe as Demon Souls. Oh no, you got us. Got to disappear in a puff of logic. What if Elden Ring is Bloodborne 2, but it's just so far in the past we only see the descendant civilizations? Maybe. I don't know. But that can't be the case because, Sony has the rights to Bloodborne, right?
Is beasthood ascendance without guidance? Has it grown too many tendrils because it ingested the power of transformation wholly without knowing what parts of it to reject? Or is beasthood perhaps just the first stage of a mind questioning itself? The boundaries of existence are loosened, so you sink to the bottom, but after that, you can climb up again and reach higher than before. Is it like pruning a tree? You remove the tendrils of the beast rune until it looks enough like a figure bowing to the moon. In that case, is it just the idea of evil again? Are the guidance rune and the beast rune the same thing, filtered through the outlook of the beholder? Like miracles and magic and humanity and demons in Demon Souls.
So that does seem like a rhetorical question, but I will try to answer this non-rhetorically here. I think one big difference between guidance and beasthood is that beasthood is implied to be inherent, whereas guidance seems to be external. Maybe I should have decided beasthood is internal, because it's like produced with like the user's own vocal cords and like the beast roar, beast claw description, whatever it is. And this seems to have been, well, I guess you could argue that this is internal if one thinks that the dancing sprites are something within Ludwig rather than something he sees because of his sword. But I don't think that's what Acer was talking about a moment ago here. So anyway, that would kind of be my distinction between these two. So this is like more alien and this is not, potentially.
The mindset you apply makes the thing real. Is it your belief that shapes reality? If you believe in the power of enlightenment and the purity of the moon, then you will see enlightenment and a way out.
And this kind of actually still can work within the framework of Bloodborne when we consider Hemwick Charnel Lane and the Witch of Hemwick. Because during that boss fight, if you have any points of enlightenment, the Witch of Hemwick will spawn mad ones continuously to slowly stalk down the hunter throughout the fight. I mean, it's a bit of a joke fight, don't get me wrong, but if you go in it with 0 insight and you don't gain insight from encountering the witches for the first time, then none of the mad ones spawn at all, which beggars the question, are the mad ones then a byproduct of the hunter's mind, or are we just so far removed from a higher plane that they cannot interact with us when we have 0 insight? And then building off of that, it can tie into how the church followers, the church servants, can have eyes on their lanterns which shoot out like little magical beams or extra like arcane fiery type effects on their scythes, or more visible frenzy auras on their hunter rune crucifix things that they carry around in front of Vicar Amelia. But then again, that only works halfway, because once the Red Moon gets revealed and you go to Upper Cathedral Ward, the lantern dudes will still have eyes on their lanterns, even if you have less than 15 insight, which I think is kind of funny.
But if you do not, then all that awaits you is beasthood. Perhaps this is also the only thing differentiating vermin and phantasms. Whether or not Ludwig saw the guidance of the stars, he was able to pull back from beasthood. Something caused that.
The Eldritch Truth.
Goldmask's pursuit of the truth led him to discovering that the Order of the Earth Tree was built on a lie. At the end of his questline, we can acquire his proposed remedy for the order of the world, the Mending Rune of the Perfect Order. Its item description reads, "Rune discovered by the noble Goldmask, used to restore the fractured Elden Ring when brandished by the Elden Lord." A rune of transcendental ideology which will attempt to perfect the Golden Order. The current imperfection of the Golden Order, or instability of ideology, can be blamed upon the fickleness of the gods, no better than men. That is the fly in the ointment. No better than men. I think the idea of the Eldritch Truth is the humanity of the gods. That's the secret which Goldmask uncovered about the Erdtree Order. The repeated cycles of the mech economies of Armored Core are directed by human desires and the inadequacies of the AIs which are constructed to govern men. Human nature is why every faction in Sekiro pursues the divine immortal life of the dragon's heritage. It was Gwyn's human fear of those who would succeed him which doomed the world of Dark Souls, and the entire conflict in Demon Souls is the conflict of the human soul and its tendency towards doing the work of demons. If there is anything behind the Eldritch truth, I think it's that. For all of their arcane cosmic powers, the Old Ones cannot have children, and that bond is all they want. Too much time spent looking at the moon blinds the pursuers of knowledge and ascension from the world around them, and it disconnects them from it and what should matter most to them. Alant abandons Ariona, Oceros kills Ocelot, Owl tries to kill Wolf. Lawrence tried carving up Queen Yarnum to fulfill his deal with the moon presence, and now Queen Yarnum lingers around the world, doomed to hear the cries of her child.
I don't quite catch the owl-wolf connection. Does that have to do with the moon, or did I just space out too much? Because the other ones I thought were more directly moon-coded.
The game puts on a massive front with all of its Lovecraftian words and cosmicism monster design, but at its heart, Bloodborne is actually a very traditional gothic horror story, where a ghost must be quieted and the wrong done to her must be righted. The nightmare newborn must be silenced. They repeat that story in the DLC. The vengeance of Kos, actually Ghost in the Japanese, because ghost, lingers just like Queen Yarnum, and the ghost will not be
To be fair, ghost would be more like ghosto or ghosto. Probably not even like the elongated vowel to begin with. So Hilko thinks it was more that I was looking at the fingers pointing. Oh, so he's just going for immortality rather than... Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. Without Horns always thought that the spending of insight in Bloodborne was weird. Like, are the messengers taking away your memories to create stuff? And if so, why do you not regain the insight refighting bosses? So in a sense, you can regain the insight refighting bosses, but you mean like when you first encounter them? Probably because they didn't want... Like, it would probably be a little bit too cheesy and would reward low skill players for dying too much. But that's an interesting question, because... you're not really gaining insight if you keep encountering something over and over and over. At that point, it probably becomes mundane. And I feel like the nature of insight requires coming into contact with the unknown or something you haven't encountered. Maybe not entirely before, but maybe something you don't expect. So you can still gain a ton of insight if you refight a bunch of bosses in the Chalice dungeons, which is kind of unfair, but then we have to ask that question of how much is lore, how much is game mechanics, but it's a fair question nonetheless. Hilko brings up an interesting paradigm shift and says, maybe we as players keep the insight. And I like that as well. And then I could see that, Zionis. Thank you.
Calmed until the cries of its newborn can be silenced. The Eldritch truth is the humanity of the gods, and the realization that their unfathomable desires are nothing deeper than the bond between parent and child. But that's not good enough for the scholars of Bergenworth, and so they haunt the Great Ones.
And obviously my take on the Eldritch Truth is very different from this, because I disagree with the existence of a so-called Eldritch Truth and will pin it down to an artifact of localization, and I will die on that hill. And so with that being said, my interpretation of the term Shinpi is essentially a mysterious divine force which is meant to be unknowable. But with that being said, I believe it's supposed to map extremely strongly onto that kind of divinely unknowable essence at the core of all beings, which is essentially like a spiritual cosmic essence that we can't peer at directly without kind of a cosmic enlightenment, perhaps. So in Bloodborne, that kind of gets quantified as a somewhat measurable force in the similar way that like magnetism exists in our world. And of course, the way that I'm framing things might also be a little bit too simplified, and there could be more nuance to that as well.
In 1994's Kingsfield, we were given the moonlight for the very first time. It was originally the petrified dragon sword belonging to the fallen father of our protagonist, John Alfred Forrester. The father and son pair both descended into the royal catacombs, the father first, son after, and deep within, John found the sword near his father's grave. He brought it along on his journey until he met the black dragon Gyra, who awoke within it the power of the moonlight in order to destroy Reinhardt III.
And I don't know if this is right, but if I remember correctly, like the Japanese for Gyra is essentially the same as what was Jura in Bloodborne. So I don't know whether or not Jura should have been called Gyra, or if Gyra should have been called Jura. But I think the kana for their name are the same. Although I know virtually nothing about Kingsfield, so you can either choose to believe that or not, I guess. Let me back this up. Let's go a little bit further.
After, and deep within, John found the sword near his father's grave. He brought it along on his journey until he met the black dragon Gyra, who awoke within it the power of the moonlight in order to destroy Reinhardt III. Reinhardt had lodged himself deep within the royal catacombs and had become an evil tree monster feeding the seed of evil left behind in the world. He was Kagare. The moonlight was Enlightenment, the perfect weapon for the job. But it was also the bond between father and son. Reinhardt killed his father, John avenged his. In Kingsfield 2, we traverse the island of Melanat and come to understand that Gyra's presence on the island was a curse. The water of the island, once drunk, would kill you if you did not continue to drink it, and this doomed Melanat's population. And so, from the white dragon Seath, we were gifted the Darkslayer, a sword with the power to destroy Gyra. But this wasn't because Seath was benevolent. Gyra is positioned as a vile, evil god, but Seath is as well. We don't destroy Gyra to rid the world of evil, we destroy Gyra to rid Seath of competition. In Kingsfield 3, Seath poisons the mind of now King John Alfred Forrester and spreads its evil influence on the land through him. Before the game begins, Alexander, the protagonist of the second game, hides the moonlight in a lava cavern to keep it safe. He then becomes a light mage and halts the influence of his king by sealing him within a magical border. Still, the world languishes in the evil which Seath has wrought, until Prince Lyle comes of age and sets out to undo the evil of the land and defeat his corrupted father. In the end, if the player reassembled the moonlight and bests John, the king will regain his senses. Reassembling the broken moonlight is no easy feat. It requires the player to take a detour back into the tombs where Kingsfield 1 took place, where they discover that the lingering form of Gyra still exists. It's a great sequence, always love it when I visit an area from a previous game in a later game, and it ends with Gyra reassembling the sword for us.
Who remembers going back to Kanto in Pokemon Gold and Silver, or Heart Gold and Soul Silver?
Sword represents enlightenment as well as the bond between father and son. When it was shattered, so was the link connecting Lyle and John, but with the sword reforged, the paternal bond can be reforged as well. After defeating the king, he will come to his senses and will merge the moonlight with the X-Selector, our main sword in Kingsfield 3, to create a sword capable of destroying Seath. As the case is often in these games, the ultimate evil is hiding. See the Old One and the Land, see the Moon Presence and Gurman, and the Elden Beast and Radahn. We must first confront its human emissary, and after we do, and the king has merged the swords, we are teleported to the moon to face off against Seath. The swords are forged from deception, but the power they have is still real. And I think that's something we can apply to every story we've discussed in this video so far. The moon is...
I'm not gonna lie, every time I've seen footage of Kingsfield, it just looks so janky that it almost comes across more like a tech demo than an actual like game.
Often used to lie, but that's not because enlightenment is false or evil, but because those who seek the power which the moon bestows do so because they are desperate. They want an answer, and if the moon doesn't have one, they will deceive themselves into thinking one was given. But look at Lyle's triumph, at Ranni's slaying of her fingers, or at Ludwig's awakening. The moon's power is real, at least if you believe in it. What leads the fallen scholars astray is their perception.
Oh yeah, that would actually be really interesting if he ties the dark moon into this whole video essay and how it should like differ or relate to the full moon or anything like that. So, all right, my YouTube just kind of like crashed again. So if you guys have an issue in the stream, it's probably silly for me to like say anything about that right now because you might have been kicked out. But if something just happened to you now, maybe this is like a YouTube-wide thing sometimes. I don't know.
I am the finger that points at the moon. Don't look at my finger. Look at the moon.
Oh yeah. So anyway, my whole questioning that I was trying to get to with the Ranni thing was, is Ranni enlightened because she still has eyes and can like look at the moon, or she's not like looking at the white moon, she's looking at the dark moon? Is Ranni even enlightened at all? Is that a fair question? Should we consider this theme in relation to the eclipse? And if so, how does that play out in the eclipse of like Dark Souls versus Elden Ring and whatnot? And of course, you don't actually have to have answers for any of these questions at all. In closing,
I think the moonlight as enlightenment is a fascinating idea. A pure and cold radiant light which cannot be sullied by the impure things of the world. A body of water can be truly foul, but the reflection of the moon will still have the power of the moon. Kagure cannot touch that. This connection is why I think enlightenment was the natural successor topic to my Kagure video. That's 2 done, 3 to go. If you're watching this video early on Patreon, know that I am dutifully chipping away at what comes next, and it should be delivered to you soon. I've already spoiled the topic in threads and posts here and there, but in case you missed those, let me build this up somewhat. So Kagure was the obvious first video because I'm always talking about it. Enlightenment is a great counter to Kagure because of them things what we talked about in this video already. And the next...
And I meant to bring this up during the Kagure video, but within the Sunken Valley, you also get the Royal Lotus Bloom, whatever it's called in Sekiro. And there is a kind of theme that I did talk about sort of with the left-hand path being an alternative path to enlightenment, perhaps, or divinity, whatever you want to call it, that does get... represented through that lotus bloom, because through filth one can still rise to enlightenment, and so the lotus flower is often regarded as a symbol of enlightenment for Buddhists and whatnot. And so Kagure isn't necessarily like all staining, so there is still like a path to enlightenment from it, essentially.
Next video, likewise, will be a very...
Because Kagure represents the profane world. All right, I'll stop pausing.
...natural extension of the ideas we've brought up so far. Next time, we'll be exploring what happens to those who don't ascend, and are instead knocked out of tune with the harmony of the world. Join me there when we discuss the madness of From Software. If you're watching this video after it was released on YouTube, know that you can get access to the next Themes of From Software video by joining the channel Patreon over at patreon.com/medievalmegaman. I like to try and release a video every month, and when I have one ready early, they always show up there first. My way of saying thanks to you guys for supporting me over the years. You could also just message me if you don't feel like handing over money. I've got a Discord link in the description and I'm fairly active in my server, so don't be afraid of reaching out. It's really weird to be prompted to engage with videos because watching them is often such a passive activity, but if you want to support the work I do here in other ways than through Patreon, engagement really is the best way. Leaving likes, comments, and such. Don't feel like you need to be clever either. If you want to leave a comment, it can just be something like, praise the moon. Engagement pleading out of the way, let me tell you about the people who've been there for me as I assembled this video and who you should check out if you liked what you got here. Diff/Theomony/Angel No Moon/ pick a name already, girl, can be found on YouTube, where she dives into the FromSoft library, and she and I actually have a Shadow Tower story discussion video tentatively planned for recording in the not too distant future. We did one for Kingsfield already, and we streamed an Elden Ring 2 discussion, which are both linked below, along with an excellent video she did on the apocalypse of From Software. My sidekick and partner in crime, Loki, has to be mentioned here as well. He's given me most of my insight into the actual Japanese scripts of these games, and it was largely through him and Sinclair and Sophie, coming up, where I got interested in exploring these games from an Eastern perspective. If you want to dive into the retranslated stories and explore these worlds again, I highly recommend his work. His channel and his website are both linked below, and I'd also encourage you to check out the Abyssal Archive as well as the Demonic Archive. The definitive story breakdowns for both Dark Souls and Demon Souls. To whet the appetite for those, I've left links to the discussion he and I had about the story of Gwyn and the story of Demon Souls. Sinclair Lore is a channel mainstay, and I've recorded more with them over the years than I have with any other creators. Sophie and Sin have catalogued the extended From Software library more thoroughly than perhaps anyone else, and if you want FromSoft content without all the self-seriousness and joylessness you see on channels, like mine, give them a look at. I've left a link to the video they and I recorded on Manus, which spins off into a series on the Daughters of the Dark, but I frankly recorded so many videos with them that if that one isn't to your liking, just search my name on their channel, you'll have like 10 wits to pick from. And then you'll realize that I'm the dead weight and you'll just watch the videos they do solo. My main source for all things Elden Ring continues to be Smotown, and if you want a good video of his, which tangentially relates to some of the ideas I discussed in this video, I recommend his video on Goldmask and the Golden Order. I'd also be remiss to not bring up that he'll be releasing the Grace Given book next year, which explores the story of Elden Ring. While you wait, just put all of his videos on a playlist and go through that playlist a couple of times. There's the ever-brilliant Meph, who always comes in clutch with the wonderful Bloodborne wiki. The best resource on that game and a perennial channel favorite. If there's anything at all you've ever wanted to know about Bloodborne, just go over to the Bloodborne-wiki, and more than likely it's there for you to quickly pick up. And I'd also like to thank KH Knight and Last Protagonist for helping me clear up some of the lore and timeline issues I was having in production. Links for these creators and their works has been provided in the description box below. I am Aesir Aesthetics. You are viewer man, or woman. See you in the next video.
Right, so that was quite nice. So obviously this is a more recent video, so it's going to take us another month to get to part 3. But I mean, honestly, that's completely understandable with how labor intensive it really is to try and create videos, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So, all right, now that we're on the thing, I'm going to go ahead and comment on the channel, or the video rather. Hey, I really enjoyed the video on the topic of seeing the moon and enlightenment. What do you think of the brain of Mensis being hoisted up into the sky, but still being a big dummy, hoisted into the sky and seeing the moon, but still being a big dummy? So, okay. Yeah, so those are the 2 videos that I have queued up for tonight. We went way over time than I was expecting we would, but that's perfectly fine. Tomorrow I will probably check out the one video from Discerning Tarnished to round off the 2-parter with his Radahn story, and then I'll try to find some other things to fill up that night. I'll look into the whole AC6 situation and probably get that a bit more situated to begin either on the weekend or maybe on like Monday or something like that. So stay tuned for more information on that front. So as always, we'll be going live at the same time of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So until then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.